Clara?
Present.
Commissioner O'Connell?
Present.
All commissioners are here and you have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Okay, now the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now the state pledge. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the sea a symbol of perfect friendship and cultures. So, commissioners, we have an agenda before us today. Are there any changes or any modifications, or is there a motion to approve the agenda? Motion to approve the agenda. Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and we'll take a vote.
Commissioner Nyberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilera?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connell?
Yes.
The motion to approve the agenda passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I'll move into a few announcements now. On Wednesday, the hearing examiners issued a recommended decision in the New Mexico Gas Company acquisition case. That's docket number 24-00266. So the next steps for that case are for parties to file exceptions to the recommended decision. After reviewing the recommended decision and the exceptions, the commission will issue a final order. On June 3, there was a public comment hearing for New Mexico Water Service Company's financing case. So that's docket number. There will be a public hearing for New Mexico Water Service financing case. That's docket number 26-0000083. It is scheduled for June 3, and the case is related to financing for PFAS treatment facility in the Elephant Butte water system. So on May 14, the commission met in closed session, which was closed pursuant to NMSA 10-15-1H3. That's deliberations by a public body in connection with an administrative adjudicatory proceeding. So I affirm for the record that the matters discussed in the closed session were limited only to those specified in the separate notice and agenda for that closed meeting that was published prior to the meeting. And I further affirm that no final actions were taken. So now we're on to the public comment session. So as we get into the public comments, today's meeting is the agency's business meeting. So this is not a public comment hearing like we occasionally have. So I wanted to mention this because unfortunately there have been many instances where people come in thinking that we're taking some sort of action on the Blackstone case. That's not happening here today. There's somebody who's been telling people that we're taking some action to kind of get them to come. And so people come in expecting something, and it's just not something that we have on our agenda. So to be clear, today the commission is not taking any action on the Blackstone case or on the BCP proposals. On today's agenda, we have 6 items on our consent agenda. So they concern issues from broadband to some individual complaints that people have on utilities for specific circumstances. And then we have a statistical testing proposal for testing meters. And on the regular agenda, we have an interesting case regarding community solar and an inquiry into PNM's meter reading and bill estimating practices. And then after that, we have 4 presentations by the 3 jurisdictional electric utilities and staff on reliability metrics. So the commission requires the utilities to track and report on the reliability of their system. And this is very useful for us because it allows the commission and staff and stakeholders, the utilities, to be able to see where improvements are needed on the grid. And that way we're able to prioritize those improvements. So that's what we have on today's agenda. Again, no action on the Blackstone case or the BCP case. I guess I've exceeded my 3 minutes. So we'll move into the public comments. And I know that, yeah, you can go ahead and sit over here. So I'll continue providing some instructions on this. So because this is our business meeting, we only have 30 minutes of comments. So if you're all planning to provide comments, we're not going to be able to hear those today. We'll have 30 minutes for comments, and we have a lot of people in person today, and we normally give 3 minutes. I think in order to hear from more people, we should limit that today to 2 minutes. And so I'll have our general counsel here helping me keep track of the time. That way we're able to hear from as many people as we can. I also know that there is one person who had signed up last week and they were not able to provide comments because we ran out of time. Just checking, Patrick, do we have that person online?
Mr. Chair, they are not online.
Okay, let me know if they're online. And I would like to be able to take their comment as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. Ma'am, you were first. And please go ahead again, try to keep it to 2 minutes. That way we could hear from more of you. Thank you.
My name is Sally. I'm a mom to.
Oh, yes, yeah.
This
Please
is
state
my
your-
first time doing this.
Yeah, please state your name, and you're good on the mic when it's.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. My name is Sally, and I'm a mom to 3 little kids. And I'm here today with other parents to represent those that are caring for the children of New Mexico. And I understand that today you're not voting on the Blackstone purchase. We have limited opportunities to engage with you, and you are accountable to the public. So I think it's important that you see the faces of the families, and the children that your decisions are affecting. I know Blackstone promised to honor contracts with trade unions. I love that. I support trade unions, but those promises do not come for free. As a private equity firm, Blackstone wants to maximize returns for its investors. Let's not forget they've already broken our state law, purchasing $400 million in stock before getting regulatory approval. They are worth more than the entire state of New Mexico. They have massive power, and they have no regard for our laws, our authority, or our people. Their long-term plan here is to squeeze out as much profit as they can from working class people, like they have done over and over and over again. Their history is not difficult to find. There's lots of examples in their history of how they have squeezed money from working class families like us. So please, I am asking you, think of our families and all of the New Mexican families who aren't in this room today. I would rather be hiking with my children. That's what we usually do on Thursdays. But we all took time to be here because we want you to see that the decisions you're making, the votes that you take, directly impact the people in this room and the people that are not in this room that we are hopefully speaking for and bringing your attention to. Please prioritize New Mexican families, New Mexican children, the people that you represent over private equity and profit. Thank you.
For your comment. Thank you for your comment. Sir, you were next, and you can please go ahead with your comment.
Hey, my name is Paul Kinselman. I would like to remind you of your mission from your PRC webpage. We serve New Mexico by ensuring safe operations and reliable utility services at fair, just, and reasonable rates consistent with the state's legal, economic, environmental, and social policies. That is your mission. From your own website, then, your total responsibility is for service to electricity users, not the owners. There's nothing in your mission about return on investments to owners. In addition, your utility division, according to NMSA 62-19-17C, says shall represent the public interest. Doesn't say anything about investors. On the other hand, you have Blackstone saying, we seek to deliver outstanding performance for institutional and individual investors, and with a focus on delivering stable long-term capital appreciation together with a predictable annual cash flow. Blackstone is all about profit and investors. I found nothing on the Blackstone website about concern for quality of service by the companies they own. Companies owning critical resources like hospitals and energy companies concerned only about profit can kill people. I'm sure you're aware of the report on nmfce.org showing what a disaster this purchase would be for customers due to their demonstrated lack of integrity and concern in managing other acquisitions. In addition, they've already demonstrated a contempt for the law in their TXNM stock purchase. Why should we expect their management of PNM to be lawful when there is money to be made? Approving this merger is inherently contradictory. Your mission requires service. Their goal is profit. You can approve this merger only by violating your mission and lying to yourself. We, the people, where have we heard that before? Know the truth if truth matters anymore. In addition, I'd like to remind you of Rule 17.1.120.9E, which says the commission shall include in its order a statement of reasons for adopting the rule. This means if you approve the buyout, you're required to explain to us what excuse you used for the approval.
Thank you for your comment. And
I put a copy of this on the.
you can hand that copy to the council. And so the next so we have you, sir, and then I saw a line sort of forming here, so that that makes sense. If I could get maybe the next two people lined up here so that we can do this more orderly. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is James Shanley. I am a 74-year resident of planet Earth and 57 years closely connected to New Mexico. I've been privileged by circumstance to be able to observe and experience up close the effects of actions taken for and against the public interest, not only here, but also as a long-term resident of Great Britain, Australia, Japan, other states of the US, and as an international business executive working routinely in more than 30 countries worldwide, including China and India. Anyone familiar with Frank Herbert's epic saga Dune has some sense of what happens when a place is deliberately evolved from a home to a colony prioritized for extraction. For native residents, that is the ultimate effort to subordinate, if not extinguish, the public interest. You have, and no doubt will continue to hear from the public of specific dangers and threats to their interest implicit in Blackstone's private equity acquisition and privatization of TXNM and PNM. You've also heard directly and indirectly from PNM's management, affiliated entities, friends, many of the potential benefits of this acquisition. These latter should be considered in the context of Upton Sinclair's 1930s admonition that, and I quote, "It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding." I drove to this meeting today in a fully electric vehicle. I recently installed a heat pump to control the environment in my home as my swamp coolers became less capable of coping with climate change. I have solar panels on my roof. I am tethered to the world by one of these rechargeable mobile phones. I have a garage full of battery-powered tools and equipment, and I long ago abandoned trying to use an internal combustion engine-powered computer and TV. Blackstone has grown a $450 million investment fund into a $1.3 trillion portfolio by an exceptionally astute ability to read the future, acquire companies at prices that are undervalued relative to potential, hold them until that value is recognized by the market, and then take them public again, realizing extravagant profits way beyond a 10% regulatory cap. A close read of their history makes it obvious why they seek to acquire P&M. There's nothing wrong with that in the broadest sense, but it represents a colossal potential forfeit of many billions of dollars, which should be more directly accessible to the New Mexico public, especially when the value derives from a public utility monopoly whose operations are underwritten by the rate-paying public of New Mexico.
So we have other people waiting to. Thanks.
Commissioners, thank you for taking my comments today. My name is Chris Jones. Turn up the volume. I don't know how to do that. Oh. Okay, maybe I'll get closer. All right, commissioners, thank you for taking my comments today. My name is Chris Jones. I'm a resident of Albuquerque, a citizen, ratepayer, taxpayer, and disillusioned. First, I'd like to acknowledge and thank a member of your staff, Patrick Rodriguez, who reached out to me and invited me to speak today because I was left off the list at the last meeting, and I appreciate that. My comments to today are on case 2500060 UT, Blackstone purchase of P&M. You have heard hundreds of comments urging your rejection of this purchase. Comments that that the purchase is not in the public interest, that ratepayers will bear the burden of the Blackstone planned data center expansion, and that the private equity model is not suited for publicly regulated monopoly utilities. The Blackstone's recent $400 million illegal stock transfer illustrates another troubling business practice: regulatory indifference and outright lawlessness. This stock transfer is, on its face and substantively, illegal. But why such an error on Blackstone's part? Possibly two possibilities. One is that they have bad, incompetent lawyering, but with a 150-person legal team and billions of dollars in debts made annually, deals made annually, I doubt that this was a mistake or oversight, despite what Mr. Schwartzman admitted to under oath. The most likely reason for their failure to seek PRC approval is that they think they don't have to follow the law when it doesn't suit their business plan. This wasn't an error. This is part of the Blackstone business ideology. They think they don't have to answer to you. They don't have to answer to the legislature or the people of New Mexico. Now, how is that going to work moving forward if you approve this? And they have a track record that proves it. SEC violations, FTC violations, insider trading, child labor violations, wage theft, and the list is long and consistent. But they do this not because necessarily they're evil, but it's their approach to business. And you know why? Because they're good at math. They know that after the lawsuits, the fines, the judicial orders, they make more money disregarding regulations, pushing the boundaries, or just ignoring law. And if there are consequences, they'll account for it on the back end. It all pencils out for them. Don't let them disrespect you. Don't let them disrespect the people of New Mexico. You have the authority. The only question is, do you have the will? reject the Blackstone purchase of PNM. And I'll add the Bernhard Capital on top of that as well. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak on behalf of an organization or on behalf of or the, because I want to make sure if somebody's speaking on behalf of an organization. No, okay. Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Vance. I'm a concerned New Mexico resident. I appreciated that we took a few moments to say our pledges to the flags this morning. And I would like to point out that when we say the pledge to the New Mexico flag, we are pledging for friendship for multiple communities. Blackstone will not be our friend. As an example, in Fayetteville, Georgia, recent reporting has come out that there was a significant decrease in water supply for the surrounding communities around a data center owned by Blackstone. As the regulatory agencies were investigating this, what they found is that Blackstone had installed 2 illegal industrial scale water hookups. And it was draining the water from nearby communities. Blackstone was given a fine, which they paid, which, as we know, is just the cost of doing business. They'll make that up, as the previous speaker said, on the back end. Average Georgia residents end up paying that fine because Blackstone will add that in. In New Mexico, it's going to be the same thing. Blackstone has already violated our laws, has already violated the laws in the illegal stock purchase. And they don't care. They're unaccountable. These are billionaires who have an army of lawyers who will overwhelm you. They will overwhelm any state regulatory agency and dump billions and billions of dollars into maintaining their control over New Mexico power supply. Bottom line is our communities should be in control of access to energy, not unaccountable billionaires. Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. I come as a mother and a resident of New Mexico whose generations go back to the beginning of New Mexico. We have intention to stay living here unless we can't. And so it's really up to y'all to make sure that we are safe in our communities. Throughout the US, we are seeing private equity and AI centers destroy communities, take their resources, and was 4,000 people that showed up in Utah. Like, it's everywhere. We don't even have to look hard on the news to find it. So I want to be clear that I'm here to say we do not want BCP to buy out New Mexico Gas, and we do not want Blackstone to buy out PNM. Recently, we are fighting with PNM because they are putting our neighborhood at risk for burning and losing our insurance. So I'm in the Northeast Heights, and we just were fighting that, and they lied and changed the way they rated our community. So Bernalillo County has rated our side as a high fire risk, and now PNM just changed it to low risk to make this purchase and kind of push their way through. So PNM has proven by working with Blackstone and going behind our backs that they're willing to break the law, and they're willing to change their own rules to make things go through. So we don't feel confident with either company anymore. And we were trying to find lawyers to go against PNM, and we can't. There was one lawyer brave enough to go against PNM. So what are we going to do with a company that is friends with the president, friends with people around the world? We can't control it, and we have a changing of government really soon. So I think we just need to avoid it. There is something on the books now trying to put holds on AI centers, but I think we could avoid all of that headache by just saying no. It doesn't bring in enough jobs. They usually ship in their own people to build things. We really have to think of this as long-term protection for our families. I believe that you guys will make the right decision. Thanks.
Hi, I just have a public question. I have a public question. So I understand that you guys has listened to over 12 hours. I work 12-hour shifts, so I understand it's really hard to pay attention all 12 hours. Is what we're saying actually getting through to you guys? Are you guys listening? We see articles posted about how the Public Regulation Commission has essentially promoted the Blackstone acquisition. So I'm just wondering if what we're actually saying to you guys in these 12 hours that we have been able to, are you guys listening to us? Is it affecting your decision? Is it changing your decision? Are the facts we're presenting changing your decision? Right. Okay. But there's articles posted that you are leaning towards Blackstone acquisition. Are these articles false? They're posted by the NM source. Okay, that works. I just wanted to also explain that Blackstone has locked out trade union workers in Ohio from their jobs as linemen. So they are not pro-union. They're lying, and these advertisements on Instagram saying that the unions support Blackstone are false. They're false. Unions shouldn't support Blackstone if the unions can't even get into their jobs because of Blackstone. That's it.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm glad there's only 3 of you. It makes this so much easier. My name is Mrs. Billy, middle initial O, there, and I'm here representing Billionaires for Equity, private equity. I've never been here to your state, but I can tell you, besides the people, it's gorgeous. And I love the whole Trojan horse thing with the nuclear missiles buried in the mountains. Brilliant, really. But let's cut to the chase. Bribery is working so well with our friends at PNM. I brought a gift, what I just gave to you, Blackstone's, as a token of our appreciation for your cooperation. When the deal goes through, I'd like to highlight that New Mexico will be pet sitting our favorite project, our little data center. It's not so little, not like my last pet. I could just throw him in my Gucci bag. But this baby is bigger and better and high maintenance. In the name of inaccurate information and dumbing down humanity, it is so worth it. Here are a few highlights for his care that I would like to share. Our free-range pet project must be kept clean, very clean, and hydrated. He will need at least 275 gallons of the purest water a day. You might ask, how will a god-awful, drought-ridden, dry hellhole of a state supply this water? Billionaires for Equity to the rescue with our campaign asking new Mexicans to take the no water pledge right there. Already, I've gathered signatures from everyone in this room. This will ensure that these people give up their need for water eternally. And our pet does have a habit of humming. It's adorable, but the neighbors won't mind. They'll be so busy working to pay their utility bills, they won't be home. And it gives off such a glow, they won't even have to light their homes. Remember our motto at Billionaires for Equity, private equity. Water is life. Life is investment return. Investment return is money, and money is water. What's yours is mine, as you say here, su casa es mi casa. And as you say, we say no to red and yes to green lighting the buyout already. Thank you for your time. I've got to get back to the golf course.
Hi, my name is Joanne Emerson, and it's hard to follow such a presentation. I would like to tell you that I am opposed to private equity takeover of anything else in our state. I know that you all were appointed by our governor, and I ask that you do the will of the people. She was elected by the people, and you then need to listen to us. We have a world and a country full of unlawlessness, and we don't need the misrepresentation of Blackstone and its stock purchase to have any bearing on our state. Give the people of New Mexico the opportunity to have open discussions, have what's right for the people decided by this commission appointed by our governor. And just listen to us. Listen to us. We see rising prices everywhere. We cannot abide by rising prices for our utilities, for our water, for our gas, for our taxes, everything that goes up and up and up. And our income does not follow that. So please listen to the constituents and do the right thing by the children in this room, for God's sakes.
Hello.
Thank you. And we have time for 3 more comments.
Good morning. I would like to thank you and express my deep gratitude to you all for recognizing our voices. My name is Twyla Courtney, and I'm a single mother and caregiver to my elderly mother. I'm also a community member who cares deeply about others and tries to assist in any way that I can without being paid. I'm speaking on behalf of thousands of people who could not be here because they had to work today. I do oppose, and we all oppose, the buyout of PNM to Blackstone and the building of any data centers in our state. Our rivers are running dry. I cross the river to take my daughter to school every day, and I'm praying that there's water in that river to sustain our wildlife. I would like to quote the Cornell Chronicle throughout my expression. It says that when making money is your top priority, you risk losing some of what makes you feel human. Perceiving oneself as fully human is a central component of well-being. Feeling dehumanized, less than fully human, can have negative consequences, such as feelings of inadequacy, antisocial behavior, and isolation, and lower levels of trust. Prioritizing monetary goals over goals unrelated to the pursuit of wealth and leisure only leads to self-dehumanization, the tendency to view oneself as object-like, cold, and robotic. If each one of us in this room took our phones out and showed you the beautiful faces of our children that we work so hard to protect and secure their dreams, you might take a step back and see that things clearly. We have to protect our children and our land. I can hardly sleep at night knowing that my daughter's presentation at school is about equality and why AI is bad and why we shouldn't trust data centers and robots. I can only imagine being in her body and in her mind, wondering what kind of life is this? How am I going to survive? For a 10-year-old to be able to recognize that this could be happening in her environment could potentially mean that she won't have water to drink or clean air to breathe is unfathomable. Is there water for my dogs to drink? As I make oatmeal for my daughter or brush my teeth in the morning, I'm wondering if it's actually clean. What am I feeding to my loved ones and my children and myself? How can I be sure it's clean and not polluted? Recently in the news, we have seen bears roaming the streets and in Albuquerque and packs of deer roaming around looking for something more safe and a place to go. These are clear signs that something is tragically wrong. I care about us, and I know you do too. It breaks my heart and it angers me, and it should anger you too. Well, I would like to ask you to remember why you chose to be in the seat that you're sitting in. And I'm pretty sure it was to protect your community and to go against ill-willed acquisitions. Blackstone is already losing money, by the way. Do not become part of the problem, please. We are all asking you to be the solution. I don't even know what to tell my daughter when she asks me if she's going to be able to follow her dreams one day.
I don't even know if AI is going to take over her dreams and take the jobs that she's always dreamed of having and pursuing her goals.
Thank
I
you.
ask you
Thank you.
to deeply ask your spirit what is right. Thank you for listening to us.
Good morning, commissioners. I want to thank you very much for your public service. My name is Lauren Nickeljohn, and I'm the former chair of the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Air Quality Control Board. And so I have sat where you sit, listening to public comment and making difficult decisions. And I want to remind you and the public that a hearing officer's findings are only advisory. And you cannot use the hearing advisor's recommendation to justify your decision. And that they found for Blackstone is deeply concerning. You guys have an opportunity, well, that they found for the acquisition, for the buyout, that they found in favor. Sorry, was actually not expecting to get public comment today. But at the end of the day, you guys are here to do the public's will. And you have an opportunity. Imagine the amount of emotion in this room celebrating you guys making a decision that supports our community, because we will lift you up. And it's very emotional to hear these families give their testimony. And it's emotional for me to sit here because reading the news yesterday, I found out that Blackstone is in the process of signing a deal with Google to further deepen the vertical integration of this system. And we know that vertical integration, any first-year economy student will tell you that that is contradictory to the free market. These people have a monopoly. They will extract what they will, and they do not care about our families. They do not care about our environment. They care about their bottom line. And you guys have an opportunity for something much larger than this decision. You can show the American public that we still have officials in office who will do their work with integrity, who will look at the evidence and not the persuasion campaigns that money can build and buy. You guys have an opportunity to lead in the country in ways that other elected officials are failing us. This can be your legacy. This can be something that you are remembered for in perpetuity. And I encourage you to show that courage. I encourage you to say, I looked at the evidence, because you know what? For all the big data, putting evidence in front of us or information in front of us as evidence, it is in fact not evidence, it is persuasion. And I really encourage you guys, please, please, show us the value of your education, the value of your upbringing, the value of your ancestors, the people who taught you to love the earth and each other. Think, what would they advise me to do in this minute? And I think that all of you know that the advice that you would get would be to hold up democracy, show us that civic engagement is more powerful than money, and that you guys are smart enough to read the evidence and make the conclusion in the favor of the public.
He's been standing here a long time.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Applebaum, if you would like to speak in general,
I'm
gonna
gonna speak
uh,
because I
you-
have 2 minutes.
if you could let me finish,
You hear what I'm saying?
can you let me finish, please? Can you let me
Okay.
finish?
Well, you don't want to, they don't want to hear what I have to say, okay? So you're gonna cut me off? Fine.
You may not get to speak at all. I'm trying to give you an opportunity to speak.
Oh, I'm gonna speak.
But what I'm saying is,
2 minutes.
please do not speak about your
Smart meter?
open docket. You can speak in general about
I'll
smart
talk
meters if
about
you'd like
smart
to.
meters. Yes, I will.
Okay.
I don't know if y'all realize the smart meters have a cadmium lithium battery on it that can be tripped and burns at 6,000 degrees. It sets homes on fire. There was 3 homes in the Pacific Palisades fire. They didn't burn and they didn't have a smart meter. They can set that thing on fire. You can't put it out. It puts out an EMF 500 times stronger than your smartphone. And children who sleep next to it on the wall
okay, are getting headaches and getting sick. And they never put out the public hearing notice of Paso Electric. I'm from down the Las Cruces area. Okay, I drove here all night to get here. And they never did have the hearing on that. They went ahead and changed people's smart meters when they weren't home. And then they had an opt-out program that you can pay not to have one. Okay, now I have a medical issue. Okay, I don't have any devices and I don't want a smart meter on my house. They came in, El Paso Electric, with us like a SWAT raid with the deputies to sit there and intimidate people like Nazis. El Paso Electric was bought and approved by JP Morgan Chase Bank, now owns El Paso Electric, another bank, okay? Who is on the Epstein file? Think about that.
Thank you for your comments. So that concludes the public comment session on our agenda. We'll now move, and you're welcome to stay for the rest of it. So as I mentioned, we have several cases that are interesting. The next item on our agenda is the approval of prior meeting minutes. So commissioners, we have a set of minutes for the special open meeting we held on April 23. Are there any changes to those minutes, or is there a motion to approve them?
Chair, I'll move to approve the 2026 Summer Readiness Information Session held on Thursday, April 23, 2026, and the minutes that have been presented.
I'll second that, so we'll take a vote on that.
Commissioner Nyberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Yes.
The motion to approve the minutes for the April 23rd, 2026 special open meeting passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So next on the agenda, we have 6 consent action items. Is there any discussion on those items or a motion to approve them?
Here I would move to approve all of the items on the consent action item on the agenda.
And I will second that motion, so we'll take a vote on that.
Commissioner Nyberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Yes.
The motion to approve the orders for the 6 items on the consent agenda passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so now we're on to our regular action items. So the first item up for discussion will be presented by Mr. Kevin Getko, and this is a related to community solar and docket number 25-00010. Mr. Getko, the floor is yours.
Good morning, commissioners. As the chair stated, the case in front of you is 25-00010-UT, which is the formal complaint of the town of Clayton and Xcel Power LLC against Public Service Company of New Mexico. This matter stems from a situation wherein Xcel's Gonzo Sol Community Solar Facility, if built and operated at a 5 megawatt nameplate capacity, would produce more energy than PNM's Clayton distribution system can use, and therefore energy would need to be exported across Tri-State's transmission lines to PNM's other load centers. The record shows that that would result in additional transmission wheeling fees being charged by Tri-State to PNM. This matter was discussed by you at the January 29th open meeting, and that led to the commission issuing its order to propose solutions, which ordered PNM and Xcel and the city of Clayton to jointly propose solutions that might mitigate or eliminate the need for transmission wheeling of the energy produced by the community solar facility. The joint response was filed by the parties on April 10th, and it explains their agreement that alternative solutions, such as a battery on the Clayton distribution system, are not viable or cost effective, and states their agreement that P&M should pay the cost for firm point-to-point transmission service required for the interconnection of the community solar facility, and that those costs should be included in P&M's base rates. It also clarifies P&M's requests that the commission provide certainty that P&M will be able to recover the additional costs of transmission service caused by the interconnection of the Gonzo Sol facility. Before you today are three alternative orders. All three orders find that any additional transmission wheeling fees are not interconnection costs and therefore cannot be charged to Xcel and should instead be included in P&M's base rates. Alternative 1 finds that the Gonzo Sol facility may be built at a size of 5 megawatts and that the additional transmission wheeling costs will be charged through base rates. It also clarifies that P&M must show the additional transmission wheeling fees are prudently incurred by P&M, taking into account additional load that may be in the system in Clayton, as well as different transmission agreements that could be sought by P&M to minimize the amount of transmission wheeling fees. In other words, the guarantee comes with the caveat that, of course, P&M needs to show that the additional transmission wheeling fees are prudently incurred. Alternatives 2 and 3 are very similar to one another. They both find that any additional wheeling fees would be collected by P&M through base rates, but they determine that the generation of energy from the Gonzo Sol facility must be limited or controlled to a level so that there is no need for P&M to pay tri-state additional transmission wheeling fees. The basis for these limitations are the Public Utility Act and the Community Solar Act, and the requirement that P&M provide reasonable and efficient service, and that ratepayers and the utility not be compelled to subsidize a subscriber organization in the community solar program. Finally, the difference between alternatives 2 and 3 is that alternative 2 accomplishes its limitation by limiting the nameplate capacity of the facility, whereas alternative 3 speaks to a limitation of the export capacity, which would rely on technology to limit the export, but would allow the nameplate capacity to exceed the load of Clayton's distribution system. With that somewhat lengthy introduction, I stand for questions.
Thank you. I just have a few comments to start off. This case has been a lot harder than it had to be. And I think part of that is because of the responses that we received from P&M initially. I think the proposal that we have now is the proposal that the community solar facility was asking for in the first place. And by the proposal, I mean the proposal that P&M and Xcel worked on together. And it's common sense. It follows common practice. It's what P&M would do if it were the one owning this facility. And so it's taken a long time to get to this point. It should not have. You know, I think that the first order that would essentially adopt the proposal by P&M and Xcel is reasonable. I think that it recognizes that there are benefits to PNM ratepayers from the community solar facility. Benefits in terms of energy and capacity. And anytime you are getting energy and capacity, you need to transmit it to where it's going. And so that's what that proposal is doing, is recognizing that transmission is needed in order to receive these benefits. So we can talk about the other options as well. I would have comments on those, but those are my initial comments to start off with. And commissioners, I'll open the floor to see if you have any, to see what your comments are.
Well, Mr. Chair, I might agree that we should have handled this a long time ago as well, but I disagree that the first order provides significant benefit to PNM customers. In fact, I would argue and have argued that in this case, PNM ratepayers bear the burden that they should not have to bear. And they will ultimately bear cost of line loss and bringing energy from Clayton, New Mexico to their distribution systems that can handle that load at a fairly significant cost. And that cost will be borne by the ratepayers. And the Community Solar Act does not have, or it tells us that they do not want ratepayers to subsidize the community solar facilities. They did give us some leeway, but we have not passed any orders that have even allowed the 3% margin that is set forth in the statute. So to me, the only alternative for us is to limit the size or limit the amount of energy that the solar facility can place into the Clayton distribution system owned by PNM. And there's two alternatives. The first one goes back to January when we were first discussing this, having a 1 megawatt limitation. Since that time, we've learned that maybe that's not the most accurate metric, because that 1 megawatt may be during the hours of the day that there would be no production from the solar facility. So the second thought was to try to match the amount of energy that is produced at the community solar facility to the demand, the electrical demand of the PNM Clayton distribution system. I'm not sure that we have the magic language, and I would suggest to my fellow commissioners that, well, I'm disappointed they did not come to an agreement that really solved the issue of the transmission back down to Santa Fe or Las Vegas anyway, that we allow them the opportunity to come up with appropriate language with maybe an engineer on our staff that provides language that would say PNM is only required to take energy from the solar facility that is equal to its Clayton demand on its distribution system, and let them come up with the appropriate language. What they do with any additional energy will be up to Xcel and maybe third parties, but that we do not require PNM to take more than what the Clayton distribution system demands. And that's really the third the third order that's before us, but I would suggest that lawyers probably cannot come up with the precise language that we probably need to implement that third order. And I would simply suggest that if the third order gets any traction here today, that we have Xcel, PNM, and maybe one of our engineers, and probably one of our lawyers, or myself, or somebody, sit down in a room to come up with a paragraph that would be precise on how to craft that limitation, if you will. I can't sit here today and say that we've crafted the exact language that needs to be crafted in that order, but that would be my suggestion. And the purpose of that is to basically preclude PNM ratepayers from having to pay for the transmission cost of nominal amount of energy. It'd be less than that produced to its load system, or its more significant load centers that would be really in the Santa Fe and Albuquerque area, having transported that over a tri-state line at cost, or bearing the cost that tri-state charges for that line to those load centers. So that's the only thing that I think is in our arsenal of options that are available to us to keep that subsidization from occurring. And so I would suggest that we either do the second option or the third option. And frankly, my preference would be to do the third option, because that gives that matches demand with the load, and particularly at the time of day when solar energy would be produced, and recognizing there will be no solar energy produced in the nighttime hours, certainly a nominal production during the early morning and evening hours. So that'd be my thought process.
Yeah, I mean, this is our second go around on talking about this case, and when we were confronted with it the first time, I was ready to vote for the order that is basically option one today. I didn't like the other option, which was, 1 megawatt or even minimum demand limiting the system, because I felt like we were maybe changing a bid after we'd already accepted it. There is something that I find pretty interesting in the joint response that we did receive from PNM and Xcel, and that is Xcel explaining that they weren't aware of Clayton's situation until after they got the system impact study from PNM. And I agree with you, Commissioner Nyberg, we should measure twice, cut once, but I think we might have the magic language already. Rule 568, which is the interconnection rule that governs these facilities, does have in it as an option export limited systems. And so what an export limited system is, something that just says that this 5 megawatt community solar facility output will flex based on how much is being used in Clayton at any given time. So what it would do is allow the community solar system output to grow as system demand grows, and for small community like Clayton, and mostly residential, small commercial load, a lot of that's temperature driven daytime load. So it allows the community solar facility to be more than a minimum amount. It allows it to flex up. And why is this offered in the interconnection rule? It's a level of flexibility that interconnectors can pursue to reduce the amount of costs that a system impact study is going to impose upon them. So the concept that Xcel didn't know that Clayton was limited in the way it is when they submitted the bid, to me, and that this option is available to them as an export limited system. That's why I come to today's meeting, even though this would be the third time that we're looking at this thing, and I appreciate what you're saying, Commissioner Aguilera, and I expressed my disgust at what PNM told us at the beginning. At that time, I really do think, let's, I would support option 3, which is the export limited option.
And the reason I don't support option 3 as it is drafted is because I think the analysis is fine. Now the idea of limiting the export capacity is something I can support because it's based on the rule, because it is based on a non-static, non-arbitrary limitation. Now we're talking about power flows and capability. And so the solution I support, I think it is an elegant solution to this problem. But I would use that solution under the first order that has a different analysis. And it's really the analysis that I don't agree with. The solution itself, I think is valid.
What I think I heard was similar to what Commissioner Nyberg said. We don't really have, the third option order isn't ready to vote on it.
Well, I mean, I think there is a third option written already, but not the one that I'm talking about. That option we didn't have very much time with this. Yep.
Yeah, I'll just offer, I'm in agreement with that too, just because I read the rule and it makes sense to me. I never just do something without listening to other folks, right? So that's what I was gonna just let's give OGC a third bite at the apple. I know you're trying to transition to another job, Mr. Gengo, so it's the job you can't shake loose from. Option really, but try to get an export limited order that is approvable.
Yeah,
For the commission.
we also need to just act on this. This has been sitting for way too long. And I don't like the idea of having them come back yet again. I think whatever we craft needs to be allow for a certain flexibility to figure out the solution with the parameters that we're providing.
Yeah, my thought was not to have that thing come back to us, but if Commissioner O'Connell's correct that the language is already in front of us, then I guess I would say we don't even need to check with them. I was just concerned that a couple lawyers drafting something that they know nothing about or very little about oftentimes misses a mark. And that we probably needed some experts, if you will, to weigh in on the language, because it in my mind, it needs to be artfully drafted if it's going to have lasting effect. And so my idea was not to have it come back to us, but basically to approve a concept, tell them to draft the language that needs to be inserted in the order, and do as we've done in many cases, allow Mr. Gedko to insert that language into an order that we've approved along those guidelines, if you will. With respect to the differing analysis, there's certainly wide departure as to how you arrive at those conclusions. The latter two orders, which largely are things that I was concerned with, was concerned about the impact on ratepayers and the subsidization issue. And so it approaches it more or less from that standpoint. You know, the first orders analysis was basically that this is just this business as usual. It's just transmission. So there's differing analysis there, different approaches, and you know, frankly, I kind of hate to say this, but I'm more concerned with the result than the impact on people. So how we get there is maybe not as important as the outcome. The analysis does need to be sound, but I'm not wedded to the particular language that leads up to the conclusion. I'm more concerned with the conclusion. So, you know, however you guys want to handle it, if you want redrafting the order, if you want to, you know, get a fourth order drafted and consider it at the next meeting. I don't care, but I agree, we need to put this thing to bed quickly and we need to move on. Those parties need. You know, I'll just express some frustration. I thought we had given them an opportunity to come to some conclusion, and basically they did exactly what I thought. But they didn't give up on the real issues that I thought were there. So we got a joint response, but it didn't really address the issues that I thought needed to be addressed. That was the impact on the non-subscribers in the P&M service area, which would largely fall on the populations.
And I just have one quick comment and then a solution to be constructive. But, you know, I think the biggest disagreement is I think that the alternate recognizes the costs, but doesn't recognize the benefits. So how can you evaluate whether the situation is beneficial to the system, to ratepayers or not, if you don't have that analysis? That's my quick comment. But in the interest of moving this forward, my suggestion is, and I'm happy to volunteer, is to work with OGC to develop an order that tracks mostly the first alternate, but then begins to deviate in recognizing the rule and the limitation on export capacity, and that also recognizes that this situation is unique and distinct from most other situations on the system, because this is not going to happen very often. Most other community solar projects are going to be on PNM's distribution system, where this procurement of third-party transmission capacity is not going to be applicable. And then the solution is that we need to that we're going to place this limitation on the export capability. I think the reason I think that's an elegant solution also is because something like 1 megawatt or 2 megawatts is static, and it doesn't recognize that the demand and circumstances of the grid, the power flows, are constantly changing. And there is also some arguments in the case that there's another customer that might add another megawatt of load. And so if we allow for this limitation to recognize that there is some volatility, I think there's more reason behind that than just a static limitation where it's, I think you understand what I'm saying. But that's the order that I would suggest that we issue, and I would volunteer to work with Mr. Getko to write that.
Mr. Chair, nobody's arguing that, I mean, after we came up with, or after Mr. Getko threw the other idea out, which was the third alternative, I was on board. Nobody is here arguing it ought to be 1 megawatt limitation. So I like the flexibility that the other alternative shows. I am concerned about the analysis part and I guess if we're going to go that route, as opposed to what we've done in the past, I'd certainly like to review that before I would vote to adopt that order. So I'd say work with Mr. Getko, come up with something and let's take it up at the next meeting. If you want to go that route, if you want to go the third alternate route and maybe tweak some of the language, then I'm willing to vote on that today.
I will not vote to approve that third alternate, and in fact, I would issue a dissent that explains why I think the analysis is flawed. I really want to just issue this and not have to come back.
One thing I did hear in your offer, Chair, was for me, part of the reason for export limited is it also hopefully obviates the need to buy more transmission from tri-states. And so if you're talking export limited and that to avoid paying transmission from tri-state, with those two specifics, I can support rewrite first.
Yeah, and thank you. You're right. I did not mention that. That is also the same idea that I have. And so it's export. And that's part of this distinction is that why are we treating this project differently? It's because this circumstance would require procuring transmission over a third-party system. To me, that's a big differentiating factor. And so, yes, the order would also include the idea that it is to avoid having to purchase additional transmission capacity. I would then I'll move to have me working with Mr. Getko issue an order that incorporates the idea of capacity limitation to the facility in order to avoid procuring third-party transmission service. Second then. Is there any further discussion? I think we're ready for a vote then.
Mr. Nyberg.
I'm gonna vote no, because I would like to see the language before I would say yes, so I will vote no. I am pleased with the results.
I think you can see the language. I think OGC can send you the order and you can look at it and say that you're okay with it. Or if you have real concerns, then you can bring it back.
I'm concerned with that. I would want to, with respect to Open Meetings Act, that would require more analysis from me. I'm not comfortable with going.
Okay. I think in the interest of we arrived at the same solution in the interest of moving this forward quickly because this item has been sitting quite. I vote yes.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Yes.
the motion to approve the order with the changes that are going to be made with the chair working with Mr. Gecko passes on a vote of 2 yeses and 1 no.
Okay, the next item that we have is an inquiry that will be presented by Ms. Alyssa Herrera Waldrop from the General Counsel's Office. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Before you today is one proposed order, which opens an inquiry docket regarding PNM's meter reading and bill estimating practices for customers enrolled in PNM's residential customer self-reading program. For context, the Commission received a formal complaint in which the complainant, who is enrolled in this program and who submits her own meter readings each month, alleges that her self-reported meter readings are being replaced with estimates by PNM, which as a result is increasing her electricity bills. The issues raised in the complaint could be affecting multiple PNM customers enrolled in the program, so the primary purpose of this order is to gather information from PNM. For that reason, the order includes particular questions directed to PNM specifically about the program. There are some clarifications needed on a few of the inquiries presented, which we can discuss, but at this time, I'm happy to stand for questions and open up the discussion. Thank you.
Commissioners, would you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick us off because I think I was the part of the reason why this came together. Just again, this is just an inquiry, so we've had some drafting of trying to get the questions boiled down to where we're just trying to understand, is this something that happens a lot? And if it does, why? So that's really the point of most of the questions. And the reason I think it's valuable to do the inquiry is, again, we had the formal complaint. I personally am a self-read customer for PNM, and I had the same experience as the person in the formal complaint. I also live in a neighborhood where I walk my dog once a day, and people are well aware that I'm a commissioner, and I've had a few other people tell me that they're self-read customers for PNM. And what the thing we're trying to understand is self-read program, if you got to do it on time, but if you do it on time, you submit a read of your PNM meter to PNM. And there have been instances recently where PNM will replace the reading that the customer has submitted with an estimate. And of course, I only hear about these when the estimate's much higher than what the self-read was. So that's part of the thing, is just see if it's maybe a random thing. So some are higher, some are lower. If it's always higher, then that tells us something. If it's rare that it's higher, that tells us something. But it's really the point of the inquiry is just to get the data to see what's going on out there. And so in the process of hearing, folks had their self-read replaced with an estimate. I also got the notification that it was time to submit the self-read on my cell phone, and it was a phone call that my cell phone identified as having come from Vietnam. And so something that the utilities do that's a very valuable public service is warn people about scams, right? That it's pretty common that somebody will say, hey, I work for your utility, you need to give me money or something like that. So I see those notifications as a very valuable public service that the utilities do. So then when I'm getting legitimate communications from the utility that looks like a scam, it kind of undermines the value of those public service messages. So those are really, again, we're in the process of building our internal technical capabilities, and we saw, I think, a success of that with the export limit that we were just talking about here. This was another instance where we were working internally to try to come up with a good set of questions. Took a few tries to get them boiled down to where this is just an inquiry to see, just understand what's going on there. So anyway, that's really the point of it. And I appreciate all the hard work you put into this, Alyssa. So anyway, I just thought I would we're not allowed to talk to each other before the open meeting. I know some of these questions might look weird, but one of them was from my own personal experience, which was the phone call from Vietnam. So I thought it'd be worth it to explain that.
Well, Mr. Chair, that probably was result of a question that I raised because I found it odd that we would ask them to determine where phone calls came from and what have you, because we're pushing everybody to try to do things at less cost. And if they get a call center and somewhere else at a lot less cost than maybe having it here in the US, they're doing what we asked them to. But it does seem to me that the questions that we ask them should be direct. There were a couple questions that I thought may take more than 2 weeks worth of time to answer. And, I'd be interested if P&M gets this inquiry notice, if they have trouble answering a question within the fairly short time period allotted, I hope they'd let us know because I'd be inclined to extend the time period for a couple of them because it seemed like it's going to require some work of digging in their records to pull that information out. I'm not familiar with their systems. Maybe it's just a push of the button, but it just seemed to me that we were asking for some sophisticated data searches that may not be easily accomplished within the fairly short time that we gave them. As to the foreign calls, I don't know. I mean, what happens if they tell us that they use a foreign data center or whatever? I mean, what are we going to do with that information? What's our response? We should ask questions that we need answers to, but we ought to also ask questions that are going to be useful to us in crafting policy. So I'm just asking if they come back and say, yes, we use foreign call centers. What are you expecting us to do as a commission to go forward with that information that we now have?
Okay, so both of those things, the short time, this isn't a short time. It's basically the amount of time you have for a discovery response. And all of these things are data that they should be collecting when people call and say, I don't understand what you're doing. So if they're not collecting that data as they go, we'll learn something by them coming back saying that they're not providing that public service of actually tracking the issues or complaints as they come in, if that means they have to dig into their records and it's going to take a long time. So anyway, I think it's worth it to keep the time period where it's at. And again, yeah, if they come back and give me a reason other than what I just said, or even the reason I did just say it, we learn something when they come back to ask for more time. And then really the rest of it is about how I use this program. It's very valuable. I live in Albuquerque, my meter's in the backyard. I keep the gates locked, keep the dog inside. And so it's valuable that P&M allows me to do that. But there's just lack of communication on how it's being implemented, right? It took me 3 months to resolve my issue. So that, Nicole, first month we just paid it, didn't see it. Second month, called, worked through with customer service, got the issue addressed for those 2 months. And then it happened again the third month. And so the communication wasn't great. And this really, why you call me from Vietnam is if that's a good, legit solution, then tell me. It's that simple, right? So it's two things, scope of how often is this happening and how are people being impacted by it. I think it's worth it to do it now because we're heading into summer season and we're going to get into the tiered billing. And like one of the months that my self-read was replaced with an estimate, it pushed me into a higher billing tier too. So let's put a highlight on it before that kind of stuff starts happening. this next summer season, if there's anything happening, and don't know, it's an inquiry. And then, so that's why, yeah, I thought about those issues while I was reviewing these questions, and I think there's value in seeing if they can't answer these questions in the same period of time of discovery response. And then a lot of it like this, what if they are doing something that's perfectly legit because it's saving cost, opportunity for them to tell us that and highlight for them that the way you're doing this creates confusion on your communication.
And I suppose I would think that any foreign call center, because I get a lot of calls, but it never shows a foreign country. It always shows Ruidoso, Perezoso, Animas, someplace close, but not within the city that I reside. And I know, having answered some of those calls, those people are not from Animas or Ruidoso or Perezoso or anywhere else in the state of New Mexico, and probably have never been here. But I was kind of wondering what we were going to do with the answer once we got it, regardless of what it was. And I saw merit in a lot of the things, but that one kind of struck me as odd. But I guess if there's some merit, I'm fine with it. And I think it's knowing that people are sending in estimates and then having problems, that's a concern with the program, and the maybe people higher up in P&M need to know that there's some friction that's occurring between them and their customers as a result of this program. Maybe they need to resolve some of those issues internally as well.
Like I say, I can show you on the phone. I got country code 84 and a number, and then it said Vietnam's calling. When I get a call like that, it's like, that's a scam, right? So. So anyway, I just thought it was valuable to give some background and point out, again, we're just starting with an inquiry. There are no next steps soon or whatever. And hopefully a lot of it, just the fact we had this conversation makes a difference. So.
Thank you for that discussion. I think we're ready for a motion and a vote, but I want to double check with our general counsel that we know what version we're discussing.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you.
I move that we adopt the order opening the inquiry.
Yeah, we'll take a vote.
Mr. Nyberg?
Yes.
Mr. Aguilar?
Yes.
Mr. O'Connell?
Yes.
The motion to approve the order opening inquiry passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So it's 11:30 and we have 4 presentations. So I think we can definitely start taking those. And so the first presentation will be by PNM. According to the agenda, we have Mike Prescott and Mike Moyer to present. And so this is in the case caption in the matter of a compliance filing docket for reliability metrics, reporting pursuant to 17.9589. Yeah, you can go ahead and come up, but before the presentations, I wanted to see if the commissioners have any comments they would like to make on the reliability metrics in general.
Well, I'm just looking forward to the presentations. This is a step in what we expect is a learning process that'll play out over a number of years. So thanks for being here and looking forward to getting this going.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll turn the floor over to you.
It's going to be on.
online. Just let me know which page. Thank you. So it seems like the presentations are showing up online, but for some reason not in these TVs in here, so apologize for that.
Okay, very good. I'm Mike Prescott, Director of T&D Operations with P&M. So, Mike Moyer, the Director of Distribution Engineering at P&M. Thanks for having us this late morning to present on 2025's P&M's reliability results. And we'll go ahead and get started with the next slide, please. So here's our presentation agenda. Now we're going to cover our 2025 reliability metrics themselves. We'll talk about our major event days, our top transmission and distribution outages, our top outage causes and those trends, interruptions due to wildfire risk, worst performing feeders, and then finally we're going to talk about some of the integrated solutions we're using to improve reliability going forward. Next slide, please. So this image here is it's an approximation of our customer service territories and divisions by SAIDI performance. And if you have a color version here, you can see that essentially the areas of our service territory that underperformed our SAIDI average were Las Vegas, our East Mountains District, and Silver City. All other areas where we serve distribution within our system were above that SAIDI average. And we'll talk about some of those reasons here going forward. All right, next slide, please. Here's our 2025 total reliability metrics. So our average service availability index was 99.98%, which is in keeping with our 10-year trend. Our SAIDI performance here for 2025 was 116.51 minutes, excluding major event days, which is a reduction of about 8 fewer minutes than in 2024, MEDs excluded. Our safety results were 0.887 interruptions per customer, and our KD average was 134.3. Next slide, please. So this is new for 2025. This was not in our report, but this is something we wanted to show the commission. This is our core reliability metrics, and we calculated that this year for basically to exclude our wildfire mitigation events from our overall total SAIDI numbers. So as you can see on the slide, our core metrics are calculated by removing or excluding wildfire mitigation events from the total metrics. These types of events would be our public safety power shutoffs, any outages that occur in our high fire risk areas during red flag warnings, or if we needed to de-energize proactively for a fire encroachment event, which we did have to do in 2025. So what we call wildfire mitigation SAIDI, that was 21.35 minutes of our overall total, which was about 18% of our total SAIDI for the year. SAFE was 0.09 interruptions. And then KD, if you look at our KD for wildfire safety, that was 258, it was a little over 258 minutes, which results in a core KD of 121.51 minutes. And there's a reason that that number is so significant, and that was for our proactive de-energization due to the trout fire in 2025. That lasted about a week, so that really ramped up our KD number overall. Next slide, please. So this really just is a graphic that depicts our core versus our wildfire safety setting SAIDI. The blue is the core. As you can see, it follows a fairly normal distribution, January accepted. And then our wildfire safety setting SAIDI generally occurs during those periods of extreme weather, high fire risk weather in March through the end of June. Next slide, please. So major event days. Our major event days are trending higher overall, but 2025 was below average, fortunately. We experienced 1 MED in 2025 compared to 6 in 2024. So that's a pretty significant reduction. Our total SADI, including our MEDs, was 152 fewer minutes than in 2024, which is a drastic decrease. For context, in 2025, I know we're not there yet, but we have had 1 MED so far this year, and that was the Ruidoso ice storm. Next slide, please. This was our major event day. So on March 18th of 2025, we had a severe high wind dust storm that hit Albuquerque and Santa Fe. We had winds in excess of 70 miles per hour, and that resulted in numerous outages, but one major transmission outage through the core of Albuquerque resulted in about 38,000 customers offline for a duration of time, which drove our SADI up to 8.59 minutes for the day. We did have all customers restored within 24 hours. In fact, we had them all restored within 12 hours. It was a little over 10 hours to restore all of those customers. Next slide, please. Top outage cause trends. So equipment still leads the way here by a large margin. You know, equipment could be anything from cable faults to cross arm failures, conductor slap, things like that. That still drives the majority of our SADI minutes, even though our performance was better in 2025 versus 2024. Everything else, with the exception of lightning, was down for the year, and vegetation was significantly down. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail going forward, but for the first time since 2022, vegetation was not the second leading cause of our outages, and in fact, it was our power supply transmission for this year. Next slide, please. Top transmission and distribution outages. So MEDs excluded here. Our number one outage for the year was that fire encroachment de-energization in Silver City, which resulted in about 6 minutes of SADI total. The next two, we're going to talk about some solutions here in a little bit, but these were both 46 kV outages that significantly impacted reliability in the East Mountains and in Santa Fe. So the Santa Fe ZP transmission line tripped offline during a lightning storm. It was lightning caused, and it took us several hours to restore that outage. We had a little over 9,000 customers in May. And then the third most significant outage was in the East Mountains back in January. So the ID 46 kV radial feed into the East Mountains tripped offline on one of the very coldest nights of the year. It happened at about 7:45 p.m. and it took us until about 2 a.m. to restore that service. And all of the East Mountains customers that we serve were out during that time. So 8,400 customers. The other two significant outages. So we had one in Alamogordo that happened in the summer. We had a cross arm break just outside the substation. So we had to sustain that outage until we could repair that cross arm because we didn't have any alternate feeds available. We do have plans to mitigate that with a new substation at Alamogordo. That was our one PSPS. We'll talk about that in a little bit of detail here in the coming slide, but that was back on April 17th. Next slide, please. So these were our two interruptions due to wildfire risk as required to report in the statute. So April 17th, 2025, PNM conducted their first PSPS, and that was in Las Vegas. Approximately 2,200 customers were impacted. That outage began at 11 a.m. and all customers were restored that same day about 10 p.m. We placed a significant amount of resources in the Las Vegas area to ensure that we had those customers restored in a sufficient time frame. We had about 50 linemen and personnel up there to work on essentially 2 feeders. The second interruption that occurred due to wildfire risk was that June 14th through the 21st Silver City Trout Fire. So we had 730 customers out at its peak, but the majority of those customers were restored in about 2 days. 375 customers were interrupted for the full duration, which was about a week. And that was at the request of the Forest Service to protect their personnel while they were performing wildfire fighting duties, essentially.
Question on this Vegas PSPS. That was the first one that PM's actually implemented?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Because we've had a few where people were warned it might be coming, but that was the first time it actually.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. First and only so far. Yep.
All right. Thank you. I remember you did calls from the school board.
Next slide, please. Mike.
All right, so these are our outages based off the worst performing feeders, right? Based off of SADI base going forward. You see there's quite a few on there, right? But what is significant is that there's quite a few that showed up repeated right from 24 to 25. And so we've mitigated those right going forward. So Coachy showed up twice, Coachy 12 and Coachy 11. 2 different instances, lightning was the issue, equipment failures across the board. So we replaced the feeder getaways, all the risers, did a bunch of tree trimming going forward too as well. So we fixed those issues there. What's significant about Coachy is that it's served from a radial 46 kV line, and so there's no backup feed to Coachy. So right now we're in the process of designing a new feeder tie from Kiwa down to San Domingo substation all the way back to Coachy. So if there's another event going forward, it will back up power. So, because that's what we should.
That do you know when that would be completed?
Yeah, so we're looking right now, probably late 26 going to RFP. Hopefully getting to 27, but maybe 28. We still have to get a bunch of SLAs going forward, because of the new route and everything else. So at latest it'll be 28. Again, Guyana showed up because of the PSPS. The next one is State Pen 12. First it was unknown, but we didn't find out it was lightning, and then actually it was a cable fault going forward. So we replaced the failure of a new cable. We went back, did a bunch of tree trimming too as well, and then replaced some crossarms and arresters going forward to move that up. And then Los Moros shows up twice from 24 to 25, and the cause is lightning. So right now we have a lightning mitigation program, and we're going back and creating a work order to go there to install lightning arresters across the board. A little different there. It's distribution underbuilt, but there is sections that are not just distribution by itself. So we're going to mitigate that. So. All right, next slide. Next thing is it gets worse performing feeders, but it's based off of safety. Again, there's a list there of top 20, but what stands out the most are the repeat offenders. South Pacheco was a dig-in, and so we actually had to replace the entire cable and reroute it. The way it was situated somehow, we installed it years ago on a hill that we couldn't get to, and so the contractor was digging through there through the city of Santa Fe and just dug into the line. Took a while to get back, and we had to reroute everything, and so really hard there. Los Moros shows up again, good safety, again lightning, and then Wayne 24 shows up. It's a long feed that goes out to the west side or the north part of Albuquerque, and it's aging infrastructure. It's copper, a bunch of trees. So we did a bunch of tree trimming going forward. We do have a project to replace the conductor. It should happen either in 27 or 28. And then Claremont 13 is the last one on here. It's a very old substation. We are going to replace Claremont in the next 5 years, I believe. But this one was due to trees and balloons and lighting. So it goes from, you guys know where Broadway is, essentially Broadway and Candelaria, all the way to the valley. So next slide shows our CapEx and O&M expenditures. That's really what goes into C20 for capital, especially we increased our capital funding for 25 to help mitigate and help more reliability going forward for our customers. And so that's our spending there. Oh, there we go. So, all right, next slide. This is our reliability programs, right? We still do a surgical and holistic approach, right? We are executing our integrated vegetation management plan across the board. Transmission line, substation, and relay breaker programs to address end of life assets. And Mike will talk about that later. And then we are mitigating outages with a surgical approach through our asset management programs, right? So cable replacements, switchgear replacements, et cetera. And also complementing that with our feeder rebuilds. So we take our feeder rebuilds that are worst feeders that go back for a few years, we average them out, still on the list. You go back and say, hey, this comes back with a benefit cost ratio, we replace those feeders. So it's back. We'll explain a little more about it later. Next slide.
So veg management, I mentioned this earlier, that there was a significant decrease in our vegetation caused or tree caused outages in 2025. So I'll lead with the bottom of the slide. We had a decrease of 17.2 minutes from 2024, which is probably our most significant decrease. So not only was that below our 5-year average, but that was also the lowest in 5 years. So we had a really significant year as far as vegetation performance goes. Some of those things could be attributed to up above. So we have moved to cyclical vegetation trimming in our HFA areas. Last year was the start of that cycle. So we're on a 4 to 6 year cyclical plan. And we completed about year 1 of that 6-year plan, or 1/6 of our total tree trimming in HFAs in year 1. So on top of that, we're using an AI or a satellite-based AI service to monitor vegetation growth and endangered trees. And those help us identify hazards so we don't have to do significant amount of ground patrols and things like that to help us mitigate those hazards. All of our other remaining service areas, we still do a targeted approach using our software to determine the areas of greatest need. But we're also rolling a lot of this vegetation clearing into our capital programs so that while we're doing these feeder rebuilds and other types of projects, we're getting the vegetation cleared at the same time. So we've really intensely focused on vegetation management for 2025, and I think that's paying dividends. Next slide, please. All right, so we presented on this last year, but I wanted to give an update for 2025 for our 46 kV transmission roadmap because we've made some really significant progress. As we talked about earlier in the presentation, we had 2 46 kV outages that were in the top 5 last year. I believe the majority of those have been mitigated, so I don't think we'll see those exact outages go forward. In the East Mountains, the ID line circuit breaker has been replaced, as well as all of the relaying and the additional components that essentially serve that line. We've also done comprehensive aerial inspections of that line, and we have additional work planned for that line going forward with line sectionalization and reclosing scheduled for 2027. And then finally, a line rebuilt to 115 kV standards in 2028 through 2030. That's a significant improvement, and I think we're going to see major gains in the East Mountains going forward from those projects. On the Santa Fe 46 kV system, so we just completed the East Mountains system, and now we're moving up to Santa Fe. This work is being performed internally by P&M Crews. We have relay upgrades already completed. We have 4 more relay packages scheduled for 2026 and 2027. And then we get into the big apparatus replacements that are starting already. So we're going to replace circuit breakers and transformers between now and 2028, total of 11 circuit breakers and 2 transformers. Essentially the 46 kV system, with the exception of the transmission lines themselves, will be completely rebuilt in the Santa Fe area. It's long overdue. We also have 5 substation upgrades planned for 2028 through 2032. And eventually we will be rebuilding the line as well. Some of those lines are the first transmission lines that we have in our system. They're ready to be replaced. Last highlight here, if you noticed on that very first slide, we talked about Las Vegas underperforming in SAIDI minutes. We are completely decommissioning the 46 kV system in Las Vegas. And we're in the process of upgrading to a modern 115 kV substation that will be fed directly from Valencia switching station. So that entire 46 kV system will be obsolete here by the end of this year. Next slide, please.
All right, so these are our programs from the ground up, right, to make reliability better, resiliency better too as well. So we do surgical and proactive reliability projects, right? So our first one is wildfire mitigation and wildfire pole replacements. So if you believe our programs are every 2 years, right? So the first year is engineering, second year is actually construction, and then they overlap, right? So the following years overlap. So you have construction, second year, new engineering starts first year, et cetera. So this year we did 32 isolation devices, 11 cutout fuse isolation points, and 800 poles replaced and wrapped in HFA areas. Okay. The second one is our feeder rebuilds. So approximately we replaced 50 miles of overhead backbone and underground backbone. That includes cable, wires, equipment, poles, etc. 3 is cable replacement in our looping program. This coincides to table 11.2 on the report. We evaluated almost 5,000 miles and replaced 29 miles as of right now. And then looping added about 12 miles there. So looping concentrates where we have a long radials underground, and if there's an outage, particularly about 8 to 12 hours to fix. So now we're actually bringing it back to a looping point where now there's redundancy feed, so it doesn't take that long to fix. Open wire secondary goes back to veg management, one of our biggest ones. We are removed and replaced approximately about 10 miles. So depending on where you guys live, right? I live in the backyard area. You see a lot of up in the backyard, a lot of wire secondary. It's copper, it could be aluminum, but we are replacing that and getting rid of it as much as possible. And we could be adding more poles or transformers to offset that. Next slide. Our switchgear replacement and smart devices. So we replaced 14 live front switchgears with dead front. A lot of that's due to animals and varmints causing outages. We replaced about 30 hydraulic reclosers with electronic, so smart devices that mostly are scanning capability and have scanning to it. If they don't, they will get it eventually. We are installing fiber in some areas. Lightning mitigation. We had 2 feeders, one in Metro and one in Silver that were on the list. And so we added more lightning. We changed our standards a little bit to roughly 8 per mile instead of 4 per mile. So we'll see how that goes. And then our structure replacement program, size table 11.1, we inspected about 11,600 poles and replaced about 4,100. Next slide. So we still approach, our worst performing feeders for previous years. We calculate the benefit analysis to determine what is more beneficial. We're changing our kind of methodology instead of doing the whole backbone, because it costs so much sometimes, that we're doing sections instead. Trying to figure out if that's the worst performing section, so the feeder. So that'll help out there. We deep dive into all of our outages to make sure what is the cause and what can be done to fix those on a timely basis. And then going back to replacing our aging backbone assets with future-proof design centers, right? And so we want the best bang for buck for everybody, right? So we look at the backbone to give us, more capacity across the board. So that allows us, to drive a safe, reliable power to our customers. It enables customers to participate in more renewable programs, right? But also increase electrification. So we know EVs are coming, like it or not, right? But we need our customers there to be there. If they want electrification, we don't want to be there. They want to have houses. So, and then we're still placing laterals when we can. Laterals are a little bit difficult. We're doing a surgical approach by sections because a backbone could be 20 miles or so, right? Laterals are typically total 50 to 80 miles, right? So we have to do surgical. So, next slide.
Okay, I'll wrap it up. Yeah, essentially, safety performance significantly improved in 2025. When you account for MEDs, especially, we're talking about 152 fewer minutes in 2025 versus 2024. Weather obviously is a driver for those, but so is the work that we've been undertaking. one thing to note here, in 2025, the National Weather Service in Albuquerque issued the highest number of severe thunderstorm warnings than they have ever had in the past. So it was a very active weather year again last year. And I think our system did perform much better than it did in 2024. The second bullet there, you know, we talked about the core and wildfire reliability metrics. We want to understand how the decisions we're making in the wildfire space impact reliability. So we're tracking those internally. We're focused on both. So it's not that we exclude wildfire metrics and say, well, that's, you know, those are the consequences. We're also trying to improve on both of those metrics. But it's nice to be able to understand and analyze that separately. A good example of that is we had 35 outages last year that occurred while we had those settings in place. 35 days where outages occurred for a total of 59 outages related to those wildfire safety steps. So we'll keep an eye on that going forward. And then lastly, you know, Mike talked about the targeted investments we're doing. Mike and I both on the transmission and the distribution side, and those will be paying dividends. I expect the 46 kV performance specifically this year to be much improved. Questions?
When did you start tracking separately for the wildfire?
Basically the beginning of 2025. Yeah, and we're doing that ongoing.
I guess I would just ask, based on your presentation, what is the, and you've talked some of this, but the priorities. What does this information tell you about the system for the best?
I think it's already told us, you know, my focus has definitely been on the transmission side, transmission and substation side, and there are targeted investments that we can make that drastically impact some of these areas. Like I talked about the East Mountains and Santa Fe. The 46 kV system is an area that is, to me, it's low hanging fruit, right? We're not at the point of diminishing marginal returns when we invest in that system. One other area that I think we really, and Mike can talk about this more, is our cable replacements. Underground cable is a significant driver of our reliability, and we certainly need to ramp that up going forward so that we can make a big dent in our city performance.
Yeah, so on that part of it there, most of our cable is direct buried, right? And so we have gone to full conduit systems going forward. So if there are faults later on, they're easier to replace. We do take an analysis, right? We still use ice calculators going forward. And then what we do is it helps prioritize our list there from one standpoint. And then we put all of our projects in a thing called Copperleaf, right? And it gives a BCR too as well. And what that does, it prioritizes those projects that have the best BCR going forward, and those go into the system for trying to move AOP.
Thank you for that presentation.
Thank you for having us. 100%. Yeah, we look forward to that. Yeah, we want to see the impacts, right? If it's seen it so far, we said knock on wood already, right? We've had some windy days here already, and it's been typically pretty good. So.
Yeah, I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious. Right?
We do have a question from Commissioner Nyberg.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate all the numbers, but I would like to know where does P&M fall, maybe in comparison to other utilities with respect to these numbers? Are you in the average, or are you at the high side, low side? I see numbers and number of polls, this and that, and I have no idea whether it's significant or insignificant. So overall, where would you say PNM is with respect to your fellow utilities around the area?
I don't know if I could answer regional question, but I know our report in the executive summary states that we're below the national average. I think that'd be valuable information going forward for sure. So to maybe break those metrics down a little bit. So, because I agree with you. Be good to compare against our peers and against the region as well. I don't have all of that information, but I know we're below the national average.
So when you say below the national average, is that a good place to be or is that not a good place to be?
I feel that our performance is for 2025 is more than acceptable. I do think that we had we're significantly improved from 2024. I think we are in the ballpark, and we're certainly making progress.
And, you know, as we see on the slide 9, the top causes of the outages and equipment remain significantly higher than the others. That's one thing you have control over. And I guess that's why you're engaging in all these efforts, programs. So should we expect that line to drop in future years?
Essentially, yeah, that's our goal, right, across the board. That is our goal across the board, right, to decrease that number no matter what it is. We know we have equipment, right, it goes back to what, we have a lot of territories, or I guess municipalities that have underground ordinances, right, and then we go that route. Some people still believe in overhead, right? What is the best bet, right? And I think we got to figure that part out. What is the best bet for everybody at a cost that's good for everybody else too, right? If it was unlimited, right, it'd be no problem, right? Finding the hard part is finding labor is one, right? I think we compete. We're New Mexico. It's hard to compete with Texas and Arizona for labor for linemen, but we can get there. We can get more stuff. I always say more money is always better, but we'll get there. We need to manage our money better and figure out what are our two top. We see that cable replacements and open wire secondary are really our top two that we really focus on for distribution. Then we can just, deficit on them.
Just one other comment on the equipment. You notice weather's not on the list, right? And that's because weather may be a significant driver of equipment failure. So equipment's always going to be up there. We certainly are very interested in lowering that. But I don't expect us to see that drop out of the top cost. I want to see them all go down, right? But I think just due to our climate, our weather here in Mexico, if it stops blowing in spring and monsoons and lightning lightning is a similar cause, but monsoons in the summer, hay there, it's always going to be the top, just due to rare conditions.
So in the category of equipment failures, it would be not only true equipment failures where the equipment itself fails, it fails because there's a interaction with that equipment from some
Essentially, yeah. In some cases, it's just issues that we had one outage on the switchgear. It was a live front switchgear that's probably about 30 years old, and just failed one night. No varmint, no nothing else. So it does happen. But there's gonna be secondary causes. We try to track secondary causes on that, so it'll come out. So, and it's in the switchgear fails. That goes to the.
Thank you very much.
Just wanted to follow up on something that you were asking about, Commissioner Nyberg. I still give Commissioner Ellison a lot of credit for putting this rule together, but part of the process of this rule was bringing in experts from around the country. Like we had staff from Minnesota Commission, we had folks from the national labs. And that was the reason for that, was to put these metrics that we're hearing today on kind of an industry standard foot. So it'll help with exactly what you were asking about, was just comparisons, not just internally. I think it's great to have each utility at the same place and time so we can see what's going on in New Mexico, but eventually we'll be building up data that helps all of us understand nationwide, knowing that New Mexico is a very lightning prone state.
Works. Well, thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
No, I don't recognize you for fighting.
So appreciate the patience, and I know we're getting into the lunch hour. I think we'll maybe take a power break because it seems like they're still going. So maybe we can reconvene in 15 minutes at 12:20. So we're back, and so we'll continue the presentations with El Paso Electric Company.
Okay, we ready?
Floor is yours. Yep.
All right, well, thank you. First of all, good afternoon, Chair, Commission, and staff. Happy to be here and pleasure to have the opportunity to share our, or present on our summary from our reliability metrics report. My name is Jason Villanueva. I'm actually the manager of our operations control room and a division of our carbon emergencies as well. With me is Ty Pollard, and online is Darcy Welch. They'll probably introduce themselves when we get to their slides. I want to take a moment to really quick just to acknowledge and that our report was submitted late this year. I want to apologize for that. We had an internal miscommunication on the due date. We had some discussions internally to address that, and we look to avoid that going forward. And we're using my copy on my computer. Oh, you on the first slide? Yeah. Can you hit the next slide, please? So at a executive summary level, I want to briefly describe our service territory in New Mexico. New Mexico comprises about 23% of our customer base. And for relative, or for context, as far as reliability, it also represents roughly around 22% of our worst performing feeders. So generally speaking, New Mexico has it's been in line with Texas reliability wise. The majority of our impacts to reliability in 2025 was weather and windstorms. In fact, it was 63% of our SAIDI and 48% of our safety. A lot of that is categorized as equipment failure or primarily equipment failure and or lightning. On average, we experience about one major event day every other year. We've been seeing less in the last few years. So we did not have a major event day in 2025. We did have several storms that we dealt with, but none of them qualified to meet the IEEE standard definition of a major event day. We are using our Texas service territory and Mexico service territory combined to calculate that major event day threshold. In 2025, however, our SAIDI and safety figures were a bit higher than the previous 5-year average. When looking at the data, we did have several outages that had high customer counts, which brought the numbers up. And again, it was primarily due to weather or the outages that occurred during weather. Regarding our worst performing feeders in the last 10 years, we only had one feeder in New Mexico service territory, which is our Hatch feeder, Hatch 21 feeder, that was on the worst performing list for multiple consecutive years. All of the other worst performing feeders were just 1 year at a time, but Hatch did actually hit that repeat offense list twice, actually 3 times in SAIDI. And Ty will be speaking more about that particular feeder in subsequent slides. How we measure reliability. So, oh yeah, next slide. Right with my computer. So in the way we measure reliability, of course, we follow the IEEE standards, SAIDI, SAFE, and KD. We document all of our outages by state and by feeder. Each individual outage is being recorded to tally up the totals. We have a very extensive audit process that I want to briefly describe. It's multi-layered, and starting from the operator all the way through to internal audit department, we're quality controlling to making sure our cost codes, our times, our partial restorations, all of the operational information is accurate. A lot of the times that the data is not correct initially due to the heckness of working high call volumes or perhaps experience of the operator. So we do go back and quality control all of our outage data. Outage data is very important to us. We rely on it very heavily to make decisions in operations. Regarding MAFI, this was brought up last year too. Regarding MAFI, we still don't have what I believe to be a reliable data set because of our limitations on SCADA and our limitations on modeling to our SCADA. What I mean by that is that not all of our devices that operate momentarily are reporting back to our system. And the ones that do have SCADA, they're not integrated to our outage management system, not today. However, we do have a project underway that's going to be a significant help, not only to MAFI, but to operations in general. Our ADMS project, and that is already underway. We are in the planning stages and hopefully starting implementation very soon. Should be later this year. And that would definitely be a game changer for us. We'll be able to document and record the majority, if not all, of our May fee events. Next slide. So here we have two maps. The map on the side, on the left side, that is a copy of what we submitted in our report. And that just shows our service territory with some geographical references. The map on the right is basically what we're proposing as something that might be a visual aid for showing reliability, color-coded reliability. Last year it was, gentleman asked about our color-coding map. And so I did get with some of the other utilities to discuss, some options here. And we felt, at least in El Paso Electric, that's feeder SAIDI. It's a good metric to look at. And what we did on our map is we filtered for the 10% worst and the 10% best feeders. And so the worst are in red, the best are in green, and the rest are in between those two metrics. As you can see there at Hatch, on the western territory of our Hatch area, that's the Hatch 21 feeder that has had the worst performing feeder issue for the last few years. And then after that, it's pretty much spotty across our territory as far as the best and the worst. But like I mentioned, we will speak a little bit more about our Hatch feeder in a bit. Next slide. So regarding reliability summary, this table shows the full 10 years. For 2025, we did come in higher than our previous 10-year average as well. However, our KD did come in a little bit better. And for reference, this is right around national average, the 115 SAIDI and the 1.2 SAIFI. Our KD is slightly a little bit better. KD is basically our actual outage time rather than average with customers that did not experience an outage. So whereas SAIDI is all customer average, KD is the average of customers that actually experienced an outage. So that speaks a little bit about our operational response more than SAIDI does. And as I mentioned, there was no major event days, so the numbers are pretty much the same on 2025. Next slide. So this next slide is talking about our worst performing feeders. And for 2025, we did have 4 feeders that exceeded the threshold of 400 SAIDI minutes, and no feeders that exceeded our safety threshold. However, Hatch 21 was a repeat offender. The majority of that was due to weather. With that said, I'll pass it over to Ty to speak in more detail about our Hatch 21 feeder.
Yeah. So I'm the manager of distribution systems at Paso Electric. We oversee distribution engineering operations. And in response to some requesters, some metrics here, the decided to take a deeper dive into what was performing feeders. This one specifically is in regards to Hatch and its performance, Hatch 21. Some context is that Hatch 21 is a radio feeder. We have over 70 to 77 miles of overhead facilities serving approximately. It serves our most northwestern corner of the service territory. And we have no backroom connections to other circuits. It is also located over 40 miles from Las Cruces, which is where our nearest large dispatchable resources are for responding to larger outages. We do have troubleman support in Hatch. If we have a larger building, we're going to have response time. The table shows the performance of Hatch 21. There's an offender in 2023 where 1,221 SAIDI units and 4.3 customer outages for the safety launch in 2023, which triggered the response to looking into something like the in 2024, we performed what we call feeder patrols analysis on the results of a lot of the outages that occurred. The feeder patrols was physically the eyes on the circuit itself. What we found was we identified cross arms and arresters for replacements, as well as loose hardware and equipment damage. In response to that, we made repairs and replacements. in response to the results, magnitude of about $7,000 in 2024. And the resulting savings were reduced to about 746, as well as safety response reduced to about 300. Now we did land as the worst performer again, so we performed the analysis again, which was outage analytics. Again, it resulted in cross arm damage, compressors, full replacements, loose hardware, and other damage. We performed those repairs, but in addition to that, we installed some remote monitoring equipment, so we could do automatic notification, so we didn't have to wait for our customers to call us. We hope to improve the response. 2025 had similar results to safety, 800 units, safety minutes, but we did improve on safety again to about 2.2 outages per customer. But we're still on the worst performing of the list, so we're trying to say just like analyzing and doing more work for the 2026 on this particular circuit. We're adding thermography scans to some of our efforts. We're doing thermography scans to determine if some equipment needs replacement before we see outage. So that's an extra effort on top of the heater controls and the outage. It's to be performed so far. We found that a lot of outages to the wildlife since birds. We did find more broken use hardware causing these outages, and we're still performing evaluations. The market is going to be performed for 5 months, so we should get those results at the summer. All of this release. No, this is good. This slide in particular was a request to compare some of the efforts in Texas versus New Mexico. Now, under our most performing computer activities, there are 3 programs that we use: computer controls, knowledge and analytics, and artists. These totals do not include the performance replacement programs, total replacement programs, or the total transfer replacement programs. So, for the given years, starting in the last column, it's the liability reporting of the activities. The investments were made in successive year, which is the year the improvements were made in the accounts for both Texas.
Okay, I'll pick it back up right here. So as far as top 5.
Yes.
Yes. Hopefully. The next slide is the top 5 cost codes, and similar to what we saw earlier, weather and extreme failure pretty much remain top issues for us. I do want to point out though that actually because of this requirement, we changed our coding practices. We used to document weather as a cost code, and back in 2025 we started removing that, and we now use it as a weather code. So we have better analytics. We have to combine our weather cost codes with our lightning cost codes, and so this data is actually a little bit not apples to apples. We got to wait for a few more years to occur to be able to see some really useful trends there. But so we kind of bucketed weather and our past weather cost codes together. But ultimately, weather is still shown to be of great impact.
So it has this, I mean, it's also a little bit backwards for
Yeah,
the way
sorry
we did,
about
but it looks like there are fewer unknowns, and maybe that's why there are more under weather and equipment.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so they did have that impact for that reason. We used to cause code weather more often, or more often, but now if a outage occurs during a weather event, we could use the equipment failure or unknown as the cause code. But we're still tracking weather as its separate code, so we're still able to do analytics to weather as well. Next slide. Major event days. These are just the only 3 we've had reported for the last 10 years. And they are weather events. We typically restore most of our customers within 24 hours. And again, I want to emphasize that this is a Texas, New Mexico event in most cases. And so we do respond, our system is basically connected across state lines, and we respond operationally from the same operations control center. So we do operate as one grid across the state lines. Next slide. This here is our non-major event day events, and without getting into every single detail, I just wanted to point out that some of these events are due to equipment failure that result in a large customer impact. The event on 6/13/2021 and 1/12/2022. Our Las Cruces service territory has a substation that serves quite a bit of customers. And when a situation occurs that trips that substation, we do end up losing quite a bit of customers. And that has a significant impact to our reliability. And aside from that, it's weather as our contributor. Next slide. Regarding long interruption duration outages, for 2025, we had one outage that did result in 2 customers experiencing an outage for more than 24 hours. It was an event that occurred impacting 15 customers, but 13 of them were able to be restored through backfeeding. However, 2 customers remained out of power for more than 24 hours. As far as 12-hour outages go, we had about 5 events, weather related, and the vast majority of those customers as well were able to be restored much quicker than the 12 hours, but we did end up with about 340 customers that experienced a 12-hour outage. So in most cases, we're able to backfeed. I think in most utilities, that is the practice. We try to restore as many customers as possible before we commit to full-blown repairs. And in most cases, we do have backfeed options. Next slide, please. Customer complaints. We have no formal complaints that were submitted to the PRC, and neither did we have any informal complaints submitted to our customer care team. We did start tracking specifically outage complaints last year. Our customer care team has a new process where they can track these, and they did not report any last year. And thus far this year, we also have no formal or customer care complaints regarding outages. Next slide, please.
A quick question on that.
Yes, sir.
How are you determining that, whether it's, for example, like if a customer has an outage and they call to let you know that there's an outage at their home, I'm assuming that's not being treated as a complaint?
Correct.
Or
yeah, so typical reporting an outage is just logged as a outage ticket. But if the customer himself says, you know what, this is my 5th outage, I'm tired of this is unacceptable, or just wants to complain about it, it gets documented to customer service and gets escalated.
Okay, thank you.
And then the next
Good
slide.
afternoon, Chair.
Okay, that's my coworker Darcy should be presenting the next slides.
Thank you, Jason. Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioner, staff. My name is Darcy Welch. I'm the Manager of Energy Delivery Financial Analysis at El Paso Electric. I am responsible for budget development and oversight for our transmission and distribution operation divisions. Over the next 2 slides, I'll cover the FERC Form 1 reported plan additions, as well as costs associated with 3 reliability-focused programs. These tables presented reflect plant additions reported in our FERC Form 1, specifically assets that have transitioned from our construction work in progress to plant and service and are included in rate base. These totals represent annual transmission and distribution plant additions for calendar years 2016 through 2024. At the time of our filing, the company's 2025 FERC Form 1 had not yet been filed or completed. The FERC Uniform System of Accounts provides a standardized framework for reporting financial information across utilities, which supports consistency and comparability. However, it does not include a defined category for reliability-related spending. In response to prior commission and staff feedback, we have expanded our presentation to provide more transparency into reliability-related investments. As shown on the next slide, Thank you. As shown on the next slide, we have grouped expenditures into 3 key programs. The programs include our underground cable replacement, overloaded transformer replacements, and pole hardening initiatives. The amounts reflect capital expenditures occurred during each year, which may differ in timing from those assets that are placed in service and included in rate base in the prior slide. This is more when the spend happened, not necessarily when it was placed in service, but in general, they're pretty close to each other. Historically, these types of investments were tracked within much broader funding categories, such as just a general betterment type blanket, which limited visibility or made it very manual in order to get into the specific reliability spending tracking that you'd see on this slide. Over the past several years, we have taken steps to isolate and track these programs more directly using specific assigned funding project methods. This approach will improve transparency and aligns with Commission's expectations. And we will continue refining our tracking and reporting to further enhance reporting in future filings. And if there are no other questions about this slide, I'll turn it back to Jason.
Slide, please. Okay, a few slides on some of our activity regarding vegetation and inspections. So these tables show our New Mexico pole inspection and replacement efforts, and also our underground circuit underground efforts. So we do consider all of our underground circuits evaluated. So the values that equal to each other as far as total mile and evaluated. We do utilize tools such as our outage reliability dashboard. Helps the engineers analyze our circuits, underground circuits for outages, and based on outages and based on the type of cable, the engineers decide where to invest and replace cable. Next slide. This next slide is our New Mexico vegetation management investments. As the asterisks in the bottom notes, we don't really track overhead miles cleared. Our region doesn't have extensive vegetation that goes for various spans or even miles. Our vegetation management is very spotty due to our region, so we don't have a currently track miles that way. We just track the investments. It's not a huge investment for us. We do use satellite imagery technology. We're looking into some drone technology, but currently that's our investments for vegetation management. Next slide. This next slide is a list of our work that we do that has an impact to reliability. A lot of this work is pretty routine for most utilities, I would imagine. And it is triggered with, age of equipment or asset information or outage data. But there's a lot of effort for these programs that we invest into. And I believe they provide a lot of fruitful outcomes. Next slide. This one? Yes. Yeah, that's some of our crew members doing some training. Yeah. That's our Las Cruces school. That's the organ announcement behind them. This last slide is a summary of our wildfire interruptions, and we don't really have a large risk in our service territory. There is some for our transmission lines, but it's not extensive. And so for last year, we did not have any unplanned or planned interruptions due to wildfires in 2025. Next slide. And with that said, any questions we can entertain?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to reiterate, you said on your performance that you were basically in line with the national average.
For 2025, yes.
Okay, thank you.
2025 was a little bit higher than our normal average though. So we're typically a little bit better than.
So your big urban area is El Paso, right? And that's going to be in the Texas numbers. Does that change how we should think about, you were talking about the 80-20 split and everything kind of fits within that world, but because El Paso's the big city, does that affect where you have to spend your money?
It does a little bit, but we have a Las Cruces dock and we have 2 El Paso docks.
Okay.
And so it has its own dock as far as crew resources, but the same control room operates both.
I was just thinking in terms of like vegetation management, equipment failures, because people hit a pole. Is that more likely to happen in El Paso or in the more rural?
El Paso is definitely a more busy area. We do have a state perspective in our operations, so we make sure that Mexico has its fair share of resources.
Okay. I wasn't trying to give you an opportunity to say anything about New Mexico drivers.
Well, thank you for traveling up here for the presentation. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We'll move on to the next one. So, Xcel SPS here with us today. I'll take one. Floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Well, thank you for having us today, for the opportunity to present our reliability metric report summary. My name is Jared Sparks. I'm the manager of SPS regulatory for the New Mexico jurisdiction. With me today is Aaron Moore. He's our SPS design director. Next slide, please. So I won't dive into every bullet point for the agenda here, but the main topics we'll cover is the various ways that we measure reliability, the major outages, the major feeder issues, and then also the major investments and operations the SPS implements to improve reliability. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you'll see SPS's 4 core approaches to reliability. First, for our overhead distribution system, we continue to implement Class B construction standards of the facilities. Second, we focus not only on meeting, but exceeding design requirements across our service territories to ensure long-term performance. Third, we utilize feeder performance improvement plans to identify underperforming assets before they fail. And finally, we invest in new technology, from aegis equipment all the way to distributed energy resources. Next slide, please. And then on slide 4, you'll see SPS's service territory map that shows how our operations are organized into geographic areas with specific service centers to meet the needs of local conditions and infrastructure characteristics. This also supports our ability to track report reliability performance at a more detailed level, which you'll see reflected in the metrics presented later in the presentation. And
yeah, appreciate it. Next slide, please. And we'll talk a little bit more about our territory map and like EPE had shown earlier, we added a little bit of presentation material around system performance and how that relates back to the circuits and service territories that we have. So maybe part of the bad news, reliability kind of ticked up in a negative direction, right, in 2025. A little bit similar overall conversation, I think, is what I heard from PNM. Very active storm year. Nasty windstorm in March that we experienced across our service territory, New Mexico and Texas included. So we saw that in the data, so to speak. That's really one of the bigger drivers, even excluding the major event days. It was just an active season or more thunderstorms, rain events, that sort of thing across the board. Next slide, please. On the worst performing feeders, again, kind of looking into the detail there on the right-hand side. Most of the worst performers there coincided with weather as well. Similar to what UPE mentioned, we do try to measure the world in two different ways, what the weather's doing and then what we think the cause of the outage was and try to distinguish those two. Sometimes they overlap, you know, a lightning strike that we think might have caused our system to operate and walk out. But we don't know that for a fact. We were able to close back in and we never found any damage on our system. So there are cases where, you know, it's a kind of an unknown sort of cause. And we are moving towards, like EPE mentioned, moving towards less unknowns, less others, taking away those options to where we have a probable cause and it just best guess what was going on outside, what's going on to where you can take some kind of guess and get us better information to where we can more accurately kind of drive performance improvement. I will note on this slide, there were a couple of events in here that were related to conductor, to public damage, that sort of thing. Again, that's another one of our big drivers for some of the more significant outage events, like on here with public damage being this particular case. Next slide, please. So top 5 interruption causes, and again, leading back to the trying to get toward cause more than weather. So looking at that, overhead equipment in 2025 was a increase versus 2024. Some of that equipment failure, a big chunk of that equipment failure, was during a large wind event that we had in the middle of March, which you know had a significant impact on our equipment and our system. But you can also see, you know, lightning, unknown public damage, and other causes as appropriate throughout there. Won't talk too much maybe on this slide yet about wildfire and PSPS events and the impacts there. But we've got another slide at the end to talk about it. Those have been interruption causes that we're kind of learning to deal with, I'll say, and how to best manage both reliability and risk to the public and how to find that kind of right balance. Next slide, please. So as far as the top major event days, on the top section there, you'll see we did have 4 NEDs, official NED days, which represented a significant, I think it's about 80 SAIDI minutes there in total of our total SAIDI. You can see the March wind event is the second one there in line, which was, you know, basically a 18-hour wind event that impacted our system pretty significantly. Most notably in Clovis, Hobbs, and Carlsbad areas. Roswell did not have the same number of SAIDI and impacts from that event when wind gusts weren't quite as high within that area. But both of those wind events, though, were both right there within the March timeframe. So we had 2 events on the 14th and 18th, which were 2 separate distinct events. As far as the second snippet there on the bottom, that's non-MED. Significant large event outages. Our next grouping of large outages outside of MEDs. You can see here, you know, some of this is public contact from accidents, vehicle hit pole, some failures, a equipment failure that caused an extended outage, and a significant amount of downstream troubleshooting to find out what the known cause was. Get back to re-energize that particular recloser in that case. And then some other, you know, breaker failures. And like I think PNN led off with and mentioned, you know, sometimes we just have things fail, but we didn't anticipate. We run our normal maintenance cycles on them. Life cycle, age isn't an exception. Just kind of slips through the cracks, and some of what we saw in the relay failure there. And then some, like we said, with kind of the probable cause, you can start to see that show up in the data here as we make changes where, you know, causes probable weather. So working more towards, you know, taking guesses here whenever we don't know exactly what the issue is. Yeah, so well, polymer's the material type, you know, so that the shed on the arrestor, you know, you see the old porcelain style polymer is just kind of the latest, greatest material type, but the lightning arrestor is intended to absorb energy from a lightning strike and prevent our system from ultimately an equipment failure. The arrestor will operate and clear that energy to ground across your system, right? A number of arrestors across the system. In this particular case, that arrestor was on a recloser, which is your operating device. And it took a good bit of just troubleshooting. You know, you have a recloser operation, you typically think it's downstream, you start patrolling. I believe on this particular one, it was a battle action oil field tap that has a lot of oil field connections to it. Their system is connected to our system in such a way that we don't always perfectly coordinate with one another. So we have to kind of downstream troubleshoot their side to figure out if we had any issues on the system before we restore it, and made it all the way back to the reclosing device before we were able to troubleshoot and find that the arrestor had actually gone bad on that device and not cleared as it was supposed to. So that the arresters are there to protect us from lightning and kind of clear that and avoid momentary issues to it. Next slide, please. So as far as on C-lids, we did have some customers experiencing long duration outages. Most of these were due to some of the previous events that we talked about, but due to extended outages, 300 non-MED, or I'm sorry, 400 non-MED C-lids over 12 hours, and then 13 that were 24 hours. So did have some long interruption outages. We do have some mitigation measures in place that I'll speak to here in a minute to start working through some of these and some internal programs within the company to really tease these out and work on improvement to avoid long duration events. Next slide, please. Very similar to what I heard from EPE. We file track our formal customer complaints, like you mentioned. So, not necessarily outages, but formal complaints that we receive. And I think, like you mentioned, walking down the street, we hear our share of complaints and see Facebook posts and whatnot. But as far as any formal complaints that we received, didn't have any within 2025 to report. Next slide, please. So, yeah, that's right. And we take it seriously. I'll just say that anyway, not avoid digressing too far, but we trying to balance. Yeah. So we added a couple slides in here, and a couple of these are maybe a little geeky. This one is one of them, and I'll admit guilt on this one. But wanted to do a couple of comparisons by state. We heard some interest in that. And so wanted to we'll talk about a couple of things. Really average circuit safety between the two states, Texas and New Mexico there, is really both very close to 1, as you can see. So pretty similar. And the same is true with SAIDI. As far as an average across our circuits, still a very similar SAIDI between these two states on how our circuits operate. These bottom two graphs, if I was a data guy, what I could always be worried about is, averages versus extrema, and is there a consistent distribution? And so just wanted to show basically some distribution type data. So, kind of that decreasing function there. That's green, for the state of Texas, and light blue for the state of New Mexico is your SAIDI value. And so you can see number of, the circuit counts on the bottom, and you can just see that, those profiles look very similar. And similar for safety. You might say, New Mexico maybe has a little bit more on the higher trend that are contributing to the higher safety numbers. You can kind of see where that comes from on the right-hand side of the safety curve. But all in all, a very similar system performance between the two states on how these circuits operate. We don't see, any wild differential there between our state operation. Next slide, please. Maybe similarly, I wanted to show some comparisons by state on capital investment. So had about $112 million related to asset health and reliability groupings in our 2025 capital spend. And so I've highlighted those there within New Mexico and Texas in that pivot table. So the top grouping there is New Mexico. You can see, asset health, capacity, and wildfire. Highlighted those for both states. So $12 million in New Mexico, and 189 million is what that represents in the state of Texas. What you'll notice here is that Texas has about, let's just say, double the line miles as we have in the state of New Mexico. But you can see the capacity is significantly higher within the state of New Mexico than in Texas. And, generally speaking, that's largely due to all of the build out and capacity increases within Southeast New Mexico for oil field growth. So we continue to see, a need to spend increases in capacity to bolster our system, handle the load growth we experience in the oil field and the challenges there across the board. But we wanted to include the capacity because it's hard to completely distinguish capacity, reliability, asset health, and even our wildfire spend from reliability. Capital investments within our system generally are the same kinds of equipment replacements that bolster our system for multiple primary reasons. So whenever we invest in improved wildfire, resiliency, it tends to increase our reliability as well as far as on the strength and kind of the resiliency of our system. So all in all, just wanted to show really the key number here, I would say is, on a per line mile basis, right now, capital investment within the state of New Mexico is actually a good bit higher than in the state of Texas on a per line mile basis. So a lot of investment within the state of New Mexico from the company. And this one's probably a better slide too, even on the capital investment. But on the next slide here, we've got the data that was filed within that we had within the filing. There's a couple of data issues in here. But bottom line, we continue to see increasing capital investment within the state of New Mexico and across the board between both states, with O&M being held largely flat. There's a couple of outliers in here that you'll notice on the kind of the maroon colors there on the first years of 2017 and 18, which is a scaling problem, and it was an anomaly there. Distribution capex that represents has been about $110 million across the company and is increasing towards upward of $400 million across the company between both states, in 2026. So it continues to increase, and we haven't seen any significant decline here. So just wanted to speak to that and kind of clarify it. It was just kind of the data, the way that the data was presented. And then also just the way that the data was presented as far as like dollars for reliability, or specifically kind of what I showed before versus just carving out total dollars, kind of how we bucketize that spend, the way that we identify it. Next slide, please. As far as on inspections and replacements within our pole programs and veg programs, we continue to operate on a 12-year cadence within our pole program. So we inspect, really assess and treat. So we assess the condition of that pole. It's basically remaining strength left within that pole. And then we treat it for extended life with, wood preservatives. So it's in the year of 2025, we inspected about 23,000 poles and replaced about 1,000. Nice. Also do some other work outside of replacement. We do some trussing and reinforcement work. You'll see steel trusses driven next to poles. Like I mentioned, we do a preservative and treat the pole for extending the life of any of them that haven't been rejected for replacement. And then also now have some pole wrap programs to minimize fire impact, whether it's burn through, to minimize our pole damage to our pole system. On the veg management side of the house, continue to perform routine veg cycle clearing. I think I heard P&M mention, veg work along with our capital projects and capital programs. Maybe I'll speak a little more to that here on some other slides here next, but on many of our capital projects, we also do what little veg we have as far as trees in the eastern side of the state. We also do some brush clearing and some vegetation work on the line of those capital programs whenever we can, whenever necessary to keep our right of way clean. Next slide here. So maybe, what most importantly even is what are we going to do about it really is the next couple slides, and what do we have in place to try to improve and drive reliability. Like I mentioned on the CLID, we've got some new programs and software available to us that we put together as a company, really primarily focused on CME as much as anything, but customers who experience multiple interruptions continue to have nuisance events. But we have a 3REs, a tool that we have developed in-house that helps us to identify common performance issues across our system and what best we can do with it, and track corrective action toward those improvements. So a good way to track the work and ensure that we're driving towards performance and evaluating system performance metrics and driving capital spend. We have EPSS. So I heard wildfire safety settings discussions and some from PNM and some from EPD as well. We have a significant investment in EPSS settings across the system. It's a little more heavy in Texas right now than New Mexico due to the wildfire tier risk zones. So tier 3 and tier 2 are your high risk areas. And we have more of that within Texas than New Mexico, but we do have significant amount in New Mexico as well, mostly southeast New Mexico and northern part of the state, some in Tucson area as well. So that cuts a little bit both ways. It's worth mentioning that whenever we put power line safety settings on, number one, we increase our number of reclosers. So it increases our ability to fine tune our isolation and protection on our system. However, we put them in very fine-tuned settings during high wind days. And so that can cause us to trip out just to be very safe. It could cause us to trip out and decrease reliability for those customers because we just don't want to take any chances causing a fire with any kind of ignition event. So we see that cutting both ways right now within our data, especially in Texas, where we're a little further out so far. Something we're focused on, trying to kind of fine tune that appropriately. Trip savers, again, another reclosing type device, an isolation type device that we're deploying as a program across our system to better isolate out and avoid large outages that affect large numbers of customers. So it's a smaller kind of device that fits within a cutout and operates on lateral tabs for better isolation. Flizzr, as it's called, it's basically an installation of additional reclosing devices with SCADA to where we can perform more remote self-healing, or either self-healing or remote switching to isolate faults and restore customers in a more timely manner with less kind of field interaction, field intervention to reduce outage times. That's continuing to press forward, more investment this year than we've had in the past. And then we also have some fusing technology that we're looking at within transformers. A number of things related to fusing and system coordination, schema, and protection to both satisfy wildfire risk reduction and then also to avoid kind of routine trips and refusing within a transformer and kind of smaller lateral tab situations. Next slide, please. And then we have some more programs yet. So priority poll, we mentioned, again, a 12-year cycle program, continue to drive strong investment within that program. We have very short turnaround cycles within that program. So anything from high risk where we turn around replacements within a day to a 5-day turnaround to a 6-week turnaround, 6-month and 1-year turnaround, but all of them, regardless of the condition of the pole that's rejected, is replaced within a 1-year duration. We have a targeted underground program where we're driving towards just removing wildfire risk, towards moving facilities underground. As you kind of notice in the data, overhead devices were a big cause of outages. So whenever you underground system, we have a cable and conduit system, similar, unlike what PNM mentioned. So whenever we do have underground outages, they are pretty quick to restore, typically speaking, but we just have fewer across the board, less environmental exposure. We have some new small wire reconductor programs, which is new for us to proactively identify legacy and old wire within our system and replace that. So that's really new work that's occurring 24, 25 and going forward. And then we have what we call an assess and rebuild or an OPA program. So this is a drone-based now, autonomous drone-based program where we go out and have our patrolmen essentially remotely launch a drone and remotely it's piloted out of Denver. But the drones fly autonomously and due to the accuracy of data on our system, all the flight paths are created. We essentially fly to capture photos and have a live feedback to the cab of the truck where our patrolmen monitor and then perform on the following flight, perform their patrol work and turn in corrective action work orders immediately and get flagged on our system. So it's a 2-year to 5-year cycle, 2-year on tier 3 circuits. And 5-year cycle on our tier 2 and tier 1 wildfire circuits. So bare minimum 5-year cycle across our entire system, regardless of state. We got other programs, but also just to mention, because it's pretty significant within New Mexico right now, some voltage conversion programs, which also add resiliency and strength to our system. We've got a lot of old obsolete voltage systems still in Portales, Clovis specifically. We've addressed most of them within Roswell and Carlsbad. Still a couple of little outliers that we're cleaning up there, but largely Clovis based. A lot of that legacy equipment, if we have a failure, we can't replace it. It causes us to scramble and really have to, can cause extended outages to resolve. Next slide, please.
A question on the small wire reconductor program. How are your records? Like, do you know where that small wire is?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, our data is not perfect, but we had an ADMS, kind of our advanced grid management system. We had a data collection effort a number of years ago, and then of course we've continued to support like kind of field-driven data collection and improvement. And ultimately, we have a pretty decent data model as far as the accuracy of attribution within our system. I mentioned earlier the drone side, geospatial location is actually extremely accurate from previous investments, but even the attribution on like wire size and wire material is pretty accurate for us by and large, not perfect. But it is, we mentioned small wire, it's largely small wire. It can be a bit of a misnomer. It's really broadly kind of more legacy wire as much as anything old stuff. I think I heard P&M talk about copper, a lot of copper in the system still here. Same problem for us, right? Got a lot of number 6, number 8, copper well. We have some steel conductors still out there. So it's really bringing that up to snuff. And then, we'll talk about a little bit also the number of risk or factors that we try to also weigh in on that as far as how we risk score and apply that capital investment. So we try to find, old and legacy wire conditions, but that also have other benefits, right? So it's not just a one-off system. It also has maybe a wildfire risk reduction benefit. It also has maybe a capacity benefit where we have capacity concerns in that area. So it's a kind of a more broad look at it whenever we risk score. Yeah, the data is pretty accurate, and maybe even on the next slide, just to speak to that this is a little messy, but to speak to a little bit what EPE did there as well. We took what they did and kind of replicated something within our GIS to show kind of green is the best performing circuits, red is the worst performing circuits, and black is everything kind of in the middle. But it does give you an indication is kind of where we're located back to the service territory areas and where the poor performance is and where the good performance is, if you will. So a lot of your poor performance, as you would notice, is in kind of southeast New Mexico on these long, remote circuits and feeders. So not too surprising from what we've heard from others today. The same even up around the Clovis area, whether you want to look at it from a safety or a safety perspective. Similar sort of thing. But yeah, all of our data, maybe kind of getting back to your question as well. All our data geospatially is extremely accurate, but then even down to, pole sizes, pole heights, material sizes, our model's improving all the time. It's pretty accurate. Pole heights, even as an example on this autonomous drone program, like all that targeting of where it's going to take the photo to send back to our guys in the truck and for us to have records on what we captured on that particular inspection is all based off our GIS data. So if it's a 40-foot pole, it's going to say, okay, we think that thing's buried 10% plus 2 feet. So target at this height from ground. And all that's used and automatically created within the calculation. And it's been surprisingly accurate, actually. Our pilots were skeptics and we're like, no, we put a lot of time into our data model, and it's actually worked out really well. That program's really just about 9 months in for us here. Maybe next slide here on our PSPS events, just to talk about wildfire mitigation and impacts to kind of reduce wildfire risk. We did have in 2025 some PSPS events where we executed and proactively opened up and isolated customers. So on the 3rd, the 14th, and the 18th, we all had high wind event days where coincidence of a high wind event, red flag warning, extremely low relative humidities, which drove us to operate a number of circuits, primarily within the state of New Mexico. Those tend to be a fairly small population and consistent population that we operate and execute on. Tucumcari area, some areas in Clovis, and then a handful of spotty kind of sections within Carlsbad and Hobbs. But by and large, New Mexico's in a pretty good spot there. It has a little bit lower relative kind of wildfire risk than the state of Texas and what we see there. There's a very formal process, though, the way that we execute these as a company. And I know, well, if you guys have seen some of these, you'll get formal communications as we kind of fine tune our event and we scope that event, what we're going to need to open up and isolate. We'll look for an advanced communications and kind of work more broadly to communicate. You may be impacted the very, kind of last minute, last 24 hours, kind of isolate down to exactly who's anticipated to be impacted. Next slide, please. We talked a little bit about the metrics used on kind of how we risk score projects. You asked about, the conductor size and kind of the small wire program. But there is a number of factors that we look at, and it's hard to always perfectly weight them in such a manner that you can score consistently. But ultimately, we look at a large number of factors: wildfire risk, risk to reliability, capacity concerns, anticipated new load growth, just to name a few. Whenever we're looking at how to specifically define projects and how we're going to execute those individual projects. Next slide, please. And so finally, just to kind of wrap up, broadly have covered the metrics, lots of numbers within the presentation. We discussed the feeder improvement plans along with a large number of other capital investments to really bolster the system and our continued asset renewal and strengthening, hardening of our system to grade B across the board within the state of New Mexico. And then just talked about, new work to come. And potential new rulemaking, new adjustments that could come that could alter this. I mean, wildfire mitigation plans. There's a large number of plans by different states, have some different things in Texas versus New Mexico, but advancing that, within the regulatory compacts as well. Past that, I think that's everything we had formally prepared. So just any questions you have for us.
That's my big question I've asked twice now. Where's SPS on the? Where do you compare to this?
Yeah, and we were back there asking Google because I hate to quote Google, but I probably can get you. I certainly can get you the number for sure, but I think we're right at top quartile. Kind of right on the bubble. We do have some internal company initiatives to move into top quintile. And get her top decile. Sorry, and improve performance there. But yeah, I think it's currently, I believe, top quartile.
Well, thank you for the presentation and for making the trip over here. Appreciate the information. So last but not least, we have Utility Division staff. My understanding is we have Mr. Orland Whitney to present. Give them some time to.
All right, looks like you're seeing my screen now. I think I'll just hold the mic up here. Good afternoon, commissioners, and thank you for your time today. I'd like to thank you for your public service. Today I'm presenting my name is Orland Whitney. I'm engineer on staff, and today I'll be presenting staff's review of the 2025 annual reliability metrics in this docket. So this briefing is intended to stay in the engineering lane. The main question is pretty straightforward. based on the filed reliability reports, how are the 3 New Mexico IOUs performing, whether they're trending up or down, and what technical context is important when interpreting the reported metrics. So this slide defines 3 core reliability indices used throughout the briefing. I think you've heard all our IOUs dive into the weeds. This is a bit of a zoom out. We've discussed SAIDI, SAFE, and Katie in other meetings, but we're talking about average interruption duration. So lower values are always better. There's a different metric called SI. It's average system availability index, and that's the inverse of SAIDI over the duration in the year. So we'll kind of motor through this a little bit. You know, when we're talking about major events, comparing the IOUs, it's important to remove the major event days because those are heavily impacted by weather. However, you know, customer experience really with those included. So with that, you know, I've got those these boxes down: routine, storm, wildfire, PSPS, and restoration. Routine would just be any vegetation contacts, car hits, aging equipment, and things of that nature. This slide shows P&M, EPE, and SPS's SAIDI, SAFE, and Katie relative to the prior year. So we can see that in the prior year of SAIDI for P&M, we see a downward trend, which is good. So just a reminder that always when considering SAIDI, SAFE, and Katie, lower values are better. So upward trends are less favorable. P&M had the best outage frequency. EPE was the fastest at restoring their systems, and SPS had the highest duration pressure. And I think a caveat to all of this is we need to remember that our utilities have different operational realities. So comparing them, we have to keep that top of mind when looking at reliability indices. So here I've assembled SAIDI and SAFE and Katie, and I realize that SAFE is way down there and perhaps looks like it's doesn't even belong on this plot. That's intentional. You know, as I think SPS alluded to, you know, when you're looking at 0.868 there for P&M of color-coded orange, so the average customer experienced less than 1 outage over the course of a year. However, that's not everyone's experience. Some customers had several outages, some customers had 0 outages. It's just an average. So here I heard some interest in comparing the utilities and sort of almost need to turn your head upside down to see who's doing the best, right? No, but EPE saw some more system average duration. System average interruption duration pressure, and we can see the other IOUs are pretty close to. So SAFE is frequency, just how often our customers are experiencing outages, and again, this is excluding major event days. And then this is just restoration speed. So you know, those are in minutes, and lower values are better. I've assembled a major event days included and excluded in this plot. EPE is blue, P&M is orange, and we can see SPS is gray. So, you know, these major events can really dominate our customers' experience throughout the year. So, and again, we're just talking about 2025, but I wanted to give a little bit of context. So, this slide shows leading outage drivers in 2025. The labels differ somewhat by utility, but the pattern's familiar. Equipment, weather exposure, overhead system conditions, etc. This slide shows why the system averages alone can hide local reliability problems. A utility-wide average can look acceptable, while a much smaller group of feeders or circuits produces repeated poor customer experience. This slide shows the feeder level readout by utility. And for P&M, we see the worst feeder tables are now being reported more clearly. There's still a need for consistent multi-year history. And for EPE, we're seeing kind of localized patterns, voltage and thermal issues, and repeated feeder issues. So the SPS is also doing has most least most feeder issues in the Carlsbad and Hobbs areas. So this slide summarizes the reliability landscape that can materially affect a customer's experience. So wildfires, public safety power shutoffs, and high winds, and those public safety power shutoffs occur when winds are at 25 to 35 miles per hour with 45 and up gusts of wind during wildfires. So that's typically when our utilities respond with a public safety power shutoff. And this slide summarizes the utilities reported approaches to risk reduction and faster restoration. The common engineering themes here: better detection, better isolation, faster switching, and targeted replacement of vulnerable assets, improved field visibility and control. So in different ways, all three utilities describe programs aimed at reduction in outage exposure or improving restoration speed. So this slide shows practical restoration sequence in engineering terms. Restoration capability means being able to quickly detect and respond. So we've got there: detect, locate, isolate, restore, and repair. And this is just an FYI slide I wanted to include on IEEE interruption duration categories. If you have any questions, please let me know about this. But we're on 60 hertz, so 1 hertz is 1 cycle per second. So 60 hertz would be about 16.7 milliseconds. So these are just different categorizations of outages. These are technical follow-up questions that are intended to be follow-ups, not policy conclusions. So as we go forward, these are kind of good questions to think about, I think, when reviewing our IOUs, reliability reporting metric reports. So the main takeaways here, pretty concise. There's no reliability failure across all the 3 IOUs. So the 2025 picture is kind of a mixed metric. New Mexico is lucky not to experience as much weather as our neighboring states. So as far as we're doing, I've got some, and I realize this may be a little hard to read at the bottom here, but what you can see is P&M, EPE, and SPS way down there at the bottom of this comparison from, Texas experiences a lot of weather, and that we can see in this plot. So, I know that you can't differentiate by the gray colors, but we can see center point energy is that line going up, and this ends in 2024 because I pulled data from the EIA reports to compare states efficiently. So, but we can see that New Mexico's reliability is pretty good. And this slide shows kind of where we belong in the pack. We've got, these are our New Mexico IOUs are in that dark black, and they're not separated intentionally, just so you can see kind of where we live. So, we're right in the center of the pack for our surrounding states. This includes Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and Texas. Thank you all. Stand for questions.
So we have people calling us about outages. We should say, lucky you don't live somewhere else.
Not necessarily. I think, Texas is doing a good job in responding to their outages. And they experience a lot of weather.
I did. Another question I had that came through in a lot of the presentation, just wanted to see if you were seeing it. It sounded like there's been a lot of work on standardizing. Maybe careful about the codes that they're saying for why. Are you seeing that coming through?
Yes, certainly. I've seen an improvement from prior year reports, and that's heartening to see.
Yeah, because I remember that being a topic during the rulemaking last year. It's like, why is there so many? I mean, you're in a situation where you get to sit there and look at all of them. The other thing that I remember from the rulemaking, and I don't know if you're seeing it yet or not, but prediction that as more of these automated detection systems are implemented, we should expect to see metrics get worse because you have better information. Things you aren't seeing, you're starting to see. Is that happening? Is it too soon?
I think too soon, and that you're going to get a mixed bag depending on your oversight. So, whether a utility hires engineers to monitor that closely, or who the operators are, that all depends. So I think it's too early to tell.
Last one was everybody's experimenting with graphs, including you, and so I enjoy watching that to see. As each year the presentations get better. Were there anything you saw that you think would be a good, something that you like? Remember the U graphs, and it's like,
Yeah, so I think
out to you as a good
I think
thing.
that the hazard here is to assume that more data is always better. Mayfee, for instance, will give the utility a better picture. So that's momentary average interruption duration index. That will give a more, shall we say, granular view of what's going on at the utility. That does not necessarily help when trying to evaluate the system as a whole. So while I think it's important that the utility track this for themselves, maybe not as useful for kind of summary system-wide benefits across utilities.
Thanks, Orland. One question I have, we can't control the weather. We can't control animals. We can't control drivers. A lot of those outside influences that result in some of these events. But the one thing that utilities can control is making sure that operations, maintenance is performed adequately to detect maybe replacement needs, maybe strengthening needs. They all talked about those efforts. And I guess my question is, do you believe that our utilities, not just the IOUs, but the co-ops as well, have adequate things in place to try to minimize the outages that are caused as a result of pure, what I consider equipment failures.
So I guess I'll answer this in a way that to understand your question, the IOUs are equipped financially to handle this stuff, and I think have been communicating. That depends on the frequency of their filings and their programs. So then you're going to get something more mixed with the co-ops based on their available funds to attack these issues. And I think as a whole, I'm seeing that New Mexico is doing great for what we have. That goes for our co-ops and our IOUs.
So you
I would have the opportunity to interview several folks at Kit Carson, and Luis Reyes is their CEO, and he had noted that a large portion of their system runs through wooded areas. So their need to address wildfire issues is much different than, say, Columbus Electric Co-ops, maybe in southwestern New Mexico.
we see those differences even among the three IOUs that we have presentations today. So thank you very much.
Before the presentation.
I just wanted to be present to assist my engineer in any way he needed, and he didn't need anything, so thank you for this. He does not.
Everything's over here. Thank you.
Okay, well, let me double check. I think that concludes the discussion. It does. So, next we have communications with Chief of Staff, although our Chief of Staff had to step out. So we'll move on to communications with commissioners. I think we should. Okay. Yeah, we can do that. Mr. Cameron.
No updates from Chief of Staff's office.
Okay, as always, thank you for the discussion, with the presentations, definitely good information. And I hope that what comes out of this is the knowledge on where to invest and for our staff, what they need to focus on when there are filings before us. And so really appreciate the information that was provided. I don't think I have anything by way of communications.
I just thought I'd update a couple of things that happened while we were in San Diego last week, Pepsi. One was there was a MSC meeting for Markets Plus, and MSC reiterated that we'd like to talk to MPEC about thinking about how the board gets elected. And so that happened at the meeting, and then the MPEC meeting, which is member executive committee, they took that and said thanks but no thanks, and sent it back to us. So anyway, that I'm just going to continue trying to push to make sure that states have a role in Markets Plus governance. So that was an early step for me. I know that was a continuation of something that, Chair, you were working on. We're sitting up there. So that happened. And then the other is I've inserted myself into the conversation around resource adequacy programs in the West. Part of that is being on the COSER for RAP. Also, then there's this resource adequacy something group. That's an unfortunate acronym of RAAG. And that's a combination of folks who are working with POSER and folks who are working with POSER. And then, you know, as you know, on the POSER side, there is a lot of the participants in the EDAM who would like to build a resource adequacy construct that is interoperable with California and hopefully interoperable with RAP. And for the growing row, which is, I don't know what they stand for, but the regional organization is supposed to provide state, West-wide governance eventually for EDAM. That board doesn't exist yet, so it was kind of an interesting question to try to get the board to help with this resource adequacy program before it even really exists. But my interest in these things is mostly just taking what I learned when I was a resource planner at PNM, that let's make sure we're doing a good job with analyzing resource adequacy so we aren't building something. Well, the real goal is take advantage of diversity of many different loads and resources across a region. So make sure that anything that happens actually achieves reliability at a low cost, because it's easy just to keep adding up individual areas where people are afraid of something, and if everybody just respects everybody else's fear, you end up with this thing that is over adequate for what reliability requires, and then it comes back to us as, hey, we need this for reliability, and it came through the regional program. We've experienced that with our current regional program at SPP. So I'm just trying to make sure we have that conversation without prejudging what the outcome is. But things like, let's just make sure that whatever we do takes advantage of diversity. I understand the participants wanting these programs, because what's lacking, for us and our utilities, we have IRP. That's a mechanism that causes you to think about reliability more than just operationally. You have to plan ahead. Not every entity out west has that requirement. There are also some regions out west, summer assessment just came out. There are some regions out west that aren't as resource adequate as we are in the desert Southwest. So everybody's situated a little differently. If you are in good shape on resource adequacy, these regional programs could be fantastic as an insurance program, similar to what happened with Southwest Reserve Sharing Group. But if you're in a place that you're trying to climb out of the hole, what are you doing with your goal for that program? And then we've also got some entities that are just market players, and so are they trying to sell something they don't own? So those are the type of things that I'm just trying to force the conversation. And I know that my early attempts at getting that conversation going have been confusing to folks. So I had some good conversations out in San Diego. I think we made some progress. It's a work in progress. So I just wanted to make sure commission's aware that I'm doing that, and that motivation is just, let's move forward in a way that we benefit as we grow.
And just want to respond to that. Thank you for doing that. And I think with your experience on the RSC and having experienced changes to the planning and reserve margin there, that's really great background to come into this program that is now being proposed. And so really appreciate you doing that. And I've been talking to that the states group, also the RAG, just as and just kind of gave my ideas about preserving some flexibility and thinking about the state authority that we would be seating. And so thank you for doing that. That reminded me of one other update that I had, but see if you had any comments on the resource adequacy commission. Hey, so thank you for that update. It reminded me that I should give you an update also on West Connect. And so the states in West Connect, so this is the transmission planning region that El Paso Electric and PNM are in, have been able to come up with an ex-ante cost allocation, which it kind of hit me when we were in San Diego that the fact that we were able to do that and come up with a cost allocation that was mutually acceptable to all of us is mind-blowing. I don't think we've done that before in the past. So that'll be a proposal that we as the states submit to FERC. And so the West Connect filings, or the filings by transmission providers, will be due relatively soon to FERC. And so working with this group, I intend to work with them and come up with comments. Right now we're in the process of developing the transmittal letters that need to be submitted as part of our proposals. And we'll work on comments as well to submit on the West Connect proposals that PNM and EP and the other entities will file individually. So, and then from there, I'll also identify whether there are any additional comments that I think we should provide separately, because working with the other states, there's always, some kind of negotiation. And so far we've been able to reach consensus on all of the comments, but that might not always be possible. So also a chance that I would join the comments with the states, but in addition to that, submit separate comments if there's something different to explain. So I wanted to provide that.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's remarkable that an ex-ante idea was at least landed on. And then, I was, after San Diego, I went to a transmission class, and it was a fascinating discussion, because just a reminder that FERC has always landed on beneficiary pays in terms of transmission cost. But then in this world of transmission, it's pretty easy to identify cost, but benefits are large and diffuse and almost always underestimated during the planning process. So where beneficiary pays sometimes crashes into the fact that we can observe costs, as then, if you see this in the 1920 discussions, is I want to make sure I assign costs, cost causation. But if you step back and look at the fact that electric systems and network, it's almost impossible to improve a network without creating benefits that go to everyone who's part of the network. So that was just, I can't say that coming out of that class there was, you should do it this way, but it was just a good reminder that people will focus on cost because they can measure them. Benefits are easier to see after the line is operating, and so usually aren't, you're discounting, doing something. Glad that happened out west. Another, that's twice now in a year that something people thought would never happen out west did, right? So but California changing their law was the first.
All right. I think with that, then we can double checking, we can adjourn.
Yep.
Okay, so we're adjourned.